Chapter 9:20. The Witch of Trepidation's appearance caused a huge commotion at the scene. Right now, the 13 armies ruled over the world, and the governments of all the countries were restricted by the commanders. These armies' warriors, who possessed extraordinary powers, were not restricted by any country's laws. It could be said that they would not be punished even if they were to casually kill ordinary people. Only when the army's warriors killed each other would they be punished. What the Yellow Army needed was fear. This fear did not come from themselves, but from the fear others had toward them. This naturally required them to extract the emotions of fear from those ordinary people. With this, the Yellow Army had always been the influence that the commoners hated the most, feared the most, and feared the most amongst the 13 armies. The Yellow Army's warriors had always taken pleasure in torturing and killing the commoners and spreading fear. Among them, the general level and corps commanders were even more experienced in this. Take the Witch of Trepidation, for example. Although she appeared sexy, alluring, and extremely beautiful, no one had any feelings for her. It was because her hands were stained with the blood of her own kind. The Witch of Trepidation would torture and kill the ordinary people in her territory almost every day. Her favorite thing to do was to skin people and pull out their tendons. She was a character who could stop children from crying at night. No one dared to welcome her when she appeared. They could only watch as she walked into the hall and arrived at the conference room in China. Right now, the various television stations were broadcasting the entire process live in the conference room. There were over 100 government officials present, as well as over 20 people from the Gray Army and Yellow Army. Seeing the Witch of Trepidation's appearance, everyone present was slightly stunned. Those ordinary government officials broke out in cold sweat, and their legs and stomachs could not help but tremble. The Witch of Trepidation casually found a seat and sat down. A few members of the Yellow Army were already jogging over. The man in the lead smiled and said, "Madam, why have you come personally? The Book of Wisdom is of great importance. Can't I come?" The Witch of Trepidation threw a cold glance at him, and a yellow glow spread out slowly in the air, exuding a terrifying aura. It was the Yellow Army's ultimate technique, the spiritual light of trepidation. The few members of the Yellow Army were sweating profusely. Not only could the Yellow Army's warriors spread out the spiritual light of trepidation with their ring's energy, but those who were in a higher position would also naturally have a terrifying pressure toward those who were in a lower position. As for the other ordinary officials, they were in an even worse state. A few of the weaker ones even rolled their eyes and fainted from fright. A few representatives from the Gray Army also wore grim countenances, and cold sweat broke out uncontrollably on their backs. The Gray Army's Major General, McGraw, frowned and sighed. It seems that the Yellow Army hasn't completely given up on this page of the Book of Wisdom. Gray will probably have to pay a huge price. Another Major General, Odom, said, "Humph. Other than our Gray Army, the people from the other armies really don't have any discipline and act recklessly. If Earth continues to be ruled by them like this, then there might come a day when the world will enter the apocalypse due to internal strife, let alone going up against external enemies." McGraw nodded. The Yellow Army, Black Army, Cyan Army, and Red Army are all unstable factors. They are powerful but temperamental. All of them should be brought under our control. Earth will only have the best future if the Gray Army unifies the four seas. Just as the few people from the Gray Army were conversing in low voices, the Witch of Trepidation turned her head, and her cold gaze swept fiercely through them like a blade. "You guys, do you have any objections?" The Witch of Trepidation said coldly. As she spoke, a faint yellow glow extended out from the ground, and countless terrifying scenes flashed before the few people from the Gray Army. They had no choice but to summon all of their willpower to resist. Although they hated the existence of the Yellow Army, the Witch of Trepidation was a general-level character. Her abilities were far above theirs, and McGraw did not dare to show any disrespect. Moreover, McGraw's heart trembled at the mere thought of the Witch of Trepidation's deeds. She was a truly lawless character. Before the 13 commanders sat down for a peace talk and set up all sorts of rules, the entire Earth was in a state of chaos. In the Yellow Army, A character like the Witch of Trepidation was lawless and extremely brutal. She had even charged into a city and massacred over 1 million people in the city after killing a modernized army of 100,000 people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they were all executed. Over 10,000 people had their bodies pierced by wooden rods and were impaled into the ground. This demoness, whether it was her strength or her methods, made people tremble in fear. The Major General McGraw said, "Madam, we're only discussing the topic of discussion this time around." The Witch of Trepidation stroked her chin and suddenly said, "Great, and I will discuss the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. Everyone else can scram." Flames of fury rose in McGraw's heart, but he still held it in and said, "Madam, the discovery of each page of the Book of Wisdom requires the 13 armies to discuss it together and broadcast it live. Everyone can bear witness to it. Unless they give up, they have the right to participate. These are the rules set by the 13 commanders." The Witch of Trepidation let out a cold laugh and said, "You want to talk about rules with me?" As she spoke, the air was filled with flashing yellow light spots. McGraw felt that the Witch of Trepidation before him seemed to have suddenly become extremely massive. It was as if she had reached the clouds and would be able to trample him to death with a single step. Endless terror gushed up in his heart, causing him to break out in perspiration and tremble incessantly. However, McGraw was a major general after all, so he still guarded his mind tightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Madam, it's useless to talk to me if you want us to leave. Please discuss this with Lord Huihe." Huihe was the Grey Army's commander, one of the 13 commanders. Hearing this, the cold gleam in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes gleamed. "You dare to use Huihe to pressure me?" McGraw braced himself and said, "I wouldn't dare, but these are the rules. Even if Lord Huihe were here, he would still have to abide by them." "Ha! Then get Huihe to come and look for me." The Witch of Trepidation's eyes gleamed brightly, and the spiritual light of trepidation gushed out like turbulent waves. However, it was restrained tightly and charged out toward all the members of the Grey Army present. With the Witch of Trepidation's general-level abilities, the spiritual light of trepidation that she unleashed at full power was enough to scare the humans in an entire city into lunatics. Right now, when the spiritual light of trepidation landed on the few Grey Army's warriors, they were immediately pressured to the point of breaking down. Even a few ordinary people next to them were affected. They stood up, trembling incessantly. Their eyes turned white, and their skin gradually dissolved, turning into a muscular monster that let out incomprehensible roars. These were the sorrowful, howling monsters that were driven by fear after being infected by the spiritual light of trepidation. Other than being able to scare people crazy and suppress their will, the spiritual light of trepidation could also infect them, turning them into various monsters to create panic. Chapter 921. Only McGraw and Ormodo, who were in the lead, were resisting with their major general-level willpower. However, their bodies were already trembling, and they were about to reach their limits. The other television workers were watching the scene in the conference room while trembling in fear. The Witch of Trepidation's actions caused countless people to be filled with righteous indignation, yet there was nothing they could do. There were definitely no more than 20 people on Earth who could suppress this Yellow Army general. "It's that demon again. Is there no one who can stop her? Who can stop it? She's a general to begin with, and she has the Yellow Army backing her up. Right now, the fear of several billion people across the world is strengthening their power." When many people saw the Witch of Trepidation's actions and abilities, they could not help but feel terrified. This was also the habit of the Yellow Army, from the commander to the ordinary warriors. They would constantly proclaim how terrifying they were. It was because, to them, fear was power. As the television kept broadcasting what the Witch of Terror had done, the spiritual light of terror in the venue seemed to have become stronger. McGraw's and Odomdo's skin also started to show signs of melting. It was as if they would be infected by the spiritual light of terror at any time and turn into wailing monsters. Right at this moment, a gray light lit up. It was like a huge gray tide surging over. In the blink of an eye, it engulfed the entire venue, dyeing every inch of the air gray. An incomparably vigorous and resonant voice rang out from within the gray light. "Woman, this isn't the mountain range of despair. It's not your place to behave atrociously." As he spoke, a middle-aged man in a gray suit with his hair slicked back slowly stepped into the hall. Seeing the man's appearance, countless people in front of their televisions immediately exclaimed, "It's the Gray Army's Qin Wang." It's actually him this time. It seems that the Gray Army doesn't wish to give up on this page of the Book of Wisdom so easily either. Seeing Qin Wang's appearance, a hint of wariness flashed in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes. She said coldly, "Qin Wang, didn't your Gray Army give up this time around? Are you going to go back on your words?" Qin Wang let out a cold snort and said, "What right do you have to interfere with my Gray Army's decision?" As Fang Xinjian spoke, gray energy encompassed the few people from the Gray Army, and all the spiritual lights of terror disintegrated. Being enveloped by the gray light, the Witch of Trepidation felt that everything in the entire conference room seemed to be under the control of the other party. Even her spiritual light of trepidation was unable to invade it. As expected of someone with outstanding talent in the Gray Army, to think that he has improved so much in just a few years. The Witch of Trepidation's aura weakened slightly. She was merely spreading fear and expressing her stance during the meeting. She did not plan on fighting to the death with the Gray Army. In fact, even if the other party was unable to fend off the gray spiritual light earlier, she would only throw McGraw and the others out and not really turn them into mournful howling monsters. However, even though the Witch of Trepidation had retreated, the Qin King was not willing to let her off so easily. He said, "Witch of Trepidation, you've injured my Gray Army's warriors for no reason. You've already violated the 1-3 agreement from back then. Do you have anything to say?" The 1-3 agreement had been jointly formulated by the 13 armies back then. It was for the sake of fending off external enemies and preventing internal strife. From that day onwards, no one in the army was allowed to attack each other. As for killing other army members, they would be attacked by all the army commanders. However, the 13 armies had 13 different personalities. There were far too many contradictions and conflicts, and it was not something that could be suppressed by a single agreement. It merely reduced the number of killings. There were still many battles that needed to be fought. However, due to the Gray Army's desire for control and ambition, they had always been working hard to maintain discipline, trying their best to uphold the 1-3 agreement. The Witch of Trepidation's eyes narrowed slightly, and hints of spiritual light of trepidation flashed on her body. "Then what do you want? Apologize to them, and then follow me back. You'll be detained for 1 month. Dream on." The Witch of Trepidation let out an enraged bellow, and yellow light intertwined together, turning into a monster with several hundred eyes, countless mouths, and many sharp teeth growing out of its skin. It was as if countless monsters had been fused together. Countless people in front of their televisions cried out in astonishment at the sight of this monster. Some of the more cowardly ones even fainted from fright. This is the Witch of Trepidation's abrupt transformation monster. Just its appearance alone can bring about an effect similar to the spiritual light of trepidation. It also has the power to destroy an entire city. However, faced with the sudden appearance of the abrupt transformation monster, Qin Wang did not panic. He stretched out his hand, and the surrounding gray light turned into a myriad of gray air currents, instantly restraining the abrupt transformation monster. It was as if the King of Whales was trying to catch a huge whale. The yellow abrupt transformation monster started to struggle crazily, but it was locked onto by the gray air currents that were getting increasingly tighter and tighter. In the end, with a rumble, it was twisted into a myriad of light spots and disappeared. A hint of fury flashed in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes, but she did not flare up. Right now, the power that Qin Wang displayed had already surpassed hers. McGraw was pleasantly surprised. The ring's power that Qin Wang controls is above that of the Witch of Trepidation. That's why he was able to kill the abrupt transformation monster in a head-on clash. Outside the televisions, countless people were cheering. Many of them who had a feud with the Witch of Trepidation hoped that Qin Wang would make another move and kill this abrupt transformation monster. However, Qin Wang would not do that. At the next moment, gray light wrapped around the Witch of Trepidation's body, and Qin Wang said calmly, "After the meeting ends, I'll have to trouble you to come with me." The Witch of Trepidation merely smiled coldly. "You can say these words to our commander later." Qin Wang's expression was cold. With a wave of his hand, streams of gray light encompassed the Witch of Trepidation completely, leaving only a pair of furious eyes that could look at the meeting hall. Although the remaining members of the Yellow Army felt indignant, they were helpless. They could only secretly contact their upper echelon and wait for their response. With Qin Wang's arrival, the entire meeting hall became orderly once again. Many officials were carried out, and the order of the meeting hall returned to normal. Simultaneously, the battle in the battlefield continued to be transmitted out through all sorts of electromagnetic signals, giving rise to all sorts of fights and negotiations between the Gray Army and the Yellow Army. The Yellow Army spread terror while the Gray Army maintained order. The two of them were mortal enemies to begin with, and the fight between them was extremely ferocious. The other armies that had given up on this meeting were more than happy to watch from the sidelines. However, in the meeting hall, Qin Wang was looking coldly at the ceiling. It was as if his gaze was piercing through the layers of reinforced concrete and looking at the sky outside. Simultaneously, it was as if the entire sky was experiencing a solar eclipse. Darkness gradually encompassed a large part of the city. Countless black air currents engulfed the sky and cut across the streets, letting out shrill cries. Even more black air currents passed through the windows and doors, gathering together in the meeting hall and turning into a blurry human figure. Chapter 922. Hello, everyone. This is the report brought to you by Quiney Lacey from International Online, a female reporter said while standing outside the hall. A female reporter stood outside the hall and said, "The main topic of the 13 armies meeting this time around is the ownership of the new page of the Book of Wisdom. Other than the White Army, Black Army, Gray Army, and Yellow Army, all the other armies have chosen to give up. Just now, the Yellow Army's Witch of Trepidation fought with the Gray Army's Qin Wang. She was no match for him and was detained." Just as the female reporter was reporting the situation in the hall, the sky suddenly turned dark. Waves of black even encompassed the atmosphere, and the sun's rays gradually disappeared. Countless reporters and cameramen immediately pointed their cameras toward the strange phenomenon in the sky. A reporter shouted, "It's Grade. The Black Army's Grade is here. Please don't leave. We'll bring you the latest report regarding this meeting." Simultaneously, most of the news footage had already been cut to the hall. Black air currents gushed forth, gathering together and turning into a blurry human figure. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang's countenance was extremely grim as he said, "Greetings, Commander." The black figure opened its mouth, and there seemed to be light flashing in it. "Where are the people from the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom? Where is the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom? Where is the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom?" As he spoke, there seemed to be several hundred or even 1,000 voices ringing out. There were men and women, old and young. It was as if countless people were speaking at the same time, and there was a strange disposition to it. This was the will of the countless black ring possessors that Grade had engulfed. The wills of all the Black Army's possessors were gathered together, constantly biting and fighting against each other, forming an existence that was similar to a collective consciousness. The strongest among them was known as Grade. Hearing the other party's straightforward words, Qin Wang said, "The ownership of the new page of the Book of Wisdom can only be decided after discussion." However, before Qin Wang could continue, a myriad of bellows rang out from the black figure. "Mine! This page belongs to me. Gray Army, are you going to make an enemy out of me?" Countless bellows reverberated in the sky above the hall, causing the entire building to tremble. Countless people were shivering amidst the seething black air currents. Out of the 13 armies, the Yellow Army might be the most brutal. However, the Black Army was the most unreasonable. These consciousnesses that were devouring and fighting each other were like a madman. If they were not careful, they could cause the deaths of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people. To mortals, rather than saying that the Black Army was a group of people or a single person, it was more like some sort of moving natural disaster. However, Qin Wang put out his hand, and gray energy rose up, encompassing everyone present and protecting them. Simultaneously, he shouted with all his might, "Lord Grade, even the commander can't snatch the Book of Wisdom as he wishes." Each newly discovered page of the Book of Wisdom must be discussed by the 13 armies before the ownership can be decided. This is also a rule that you agreed to back then. However, Grade seemed as if he did not hear it all. Countless black, ghostly shadows kept on darting out from his body, shooting into midair before darting back. "I said, this is mine. You promised me. And now you're going back on your word?" Qin Wang's countenance started to turn grim. On one hand, the black air currents kept on colliding against his energy, giving him an immense pressure. On the other hand, Gray did not take him seriously at all. All of this was transmitted to the countless viewers in the other armies through the television broadcast. In outer space, in the huge space station, the Gold Army's leader, Edward. Right now, he was still busy with his own experiments, but he would occasionally throw a glance at the television broadcast when he was free. When he saw Grade descending from the sky and suppressing Qin Wang, he let out a cold snort, and the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a disdainful smile. It was unknown who he was feeling disdain towards. Elsewhere, in the distant Despair mountain range, a huge ancient castle stood on a cliff. Occasionally, there would be agonizing cries ringing out from the ancient castle, exuding a horrifying aura. The Yellow Army's leader, the king of trepidation Bauhaus, propped up his chin and looked at the television broadcast. Next to him was the Abomination Sovereign, a general-level character from the Yellow Army. He had terrifying scars all over his body, making him look like a sewn-up zombie. He said, "These hypocrites from the Grey Army are really going overboard. To think that they dare to detain the Witch of Trepidation directly. They don't take us seriously at all." The dark current was a monster who was completely encompassed in a yellow robe. Only endless darkness could be seen under the robe. The dark current said, "We've always been mortal enemies, but this is good as well. In any case, we both want to test Grade's limits and see how far he has cleared his will. Since the Grey Army is willing to stand up for him, then we'll let them stand up for him. It's just that with this, the people in the world will have less respect for us." Due to his unique characteristics, the Black Army's Grade had always been the most unstable factor among the 13 armies. He would occasionally go crazy and occasionally be rational. He was like a time bomb that could be detonated at any moment. Right now, Grade had reached the most crucial step in clearing his excess consciousness. This naturally attracted the attention of the various armies. Many people were unwilling to make an enemy out of Grade, but there were also many people who were unwilling to see him regain his rationality and become much stronger. It was because the Black Army represented greed. It was a greed that wanted to possess and engulf everything. The threat that Grade would bring after regaining his rationality was something that many people were unwilling to see. Therefore, both the Yellow Army and the Grey Army sent out a person at the same time. Their goal was to test Grade's progress. Elsewhere, the world's tallest building, which had over 800 floors, reached into the clouds and looked down on the land. In the hall on the top floor, the Grey Army's leader, a middle-aged man who looked ordinary, was sitting on a sofa, watching the broadcast on the television. Next to him, the female secretary said, "Sir, do we need to send people to reinforce Lord Qin Wang?" "There's no need for that yet." Hui stared at the television and said, "Right now is a good opportunity to see Grade's situation clearly. Moreover, with the Qin King's talent, even Grade wouldn't be able to easily injure him or even kill him. Then what about the Book of Wisdom? If Grade hasn't reached that stage yet, then we'll give it to him first," Hui said calmly. "In any case, someone will be even more anxious than us. There's no need to fight it out with this freak." Chapter 923. just as the many influences were secretly guessing Grade's situation. In the hall, Qin Wang continued to persuade Grade to calm down. The Witch of Trepidation looked on coldly from the side, and a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. This is a lunatic freak. Does the Gray Army still hope to be able to control him? Faced with Qin Wang's explanation and persuasion, the black silhouette became even more ferocious. It continued to let out roars, and the black streams of air became darker and darker, like spilled ink. Lord Grade, please remain calm. You won't be able to resolve things like this. Calm down, the black figure bellowed. Try having several hundred people quarreling in your mind every day. Let's see if you can remain calm. With Grade's bellow, the black air currents turned into a strong gust of wind that descended from the sky, pressing down toward Qin Wang. This Black Army's commander, a monster born from the engulfing of countless people's consciousnesses, finally could not hold it in any longer and made a move. Looking at the gushing black air currents, Qin Wang frowned and slapped out with his palm. Gray light formed a huge palm that clashed fiercely with the black air currents. However, with just this one clash, the disparity between the two of them was immediately revealed. The huge gray palm instantly crumbled, and Qin Wang was forced to retreat 5 steps. With each step he took, his face would turn paler, and his spirit and will would also weaken. After taking 5 steps, his countenance was already as pale as a sheet of paper, and his countenance was extremely grim. It was because streams of black air currents started bellowing crazily before him, turning into countless human figures that came gushing out. It was as if a myriad of ghosts were wailing and a netherworld was descending. Qin Wang's countenance changed. He knew that this person before him was truly infuriated. Streams of gray light rose up, filling up every inch of space within a range of 100 meters. At this moment, all the molecular movements in the world seemed to be held hostage. At this moment, Qin Wang was like a divine king who controlled the entire world. All the physical movements in the world seemed to be under his control. Immediately after, Qin Wang made a blocking action with one hand while facing the countless ghostly figures. In that instant, all the black, ghostly figures froze in midair, unable to move. They were like flies that had been caught in amber. Even the black air currents that filled up the sky within 100 meters came to a standstill, stopping all their movements. It was as if time had come to a standstill. Seeing such a situation, everyone present revealed a look of surprise. The Witch of Trepidation's countenance changed as well. This is Hui's ultimate move, whirled to the heart. To think that Qin Wang's strength has reached such a level. Such means are already comparable to the White Army and the Red Army's commanders. In the space station, the Gold Army's commander Edward was also slightly surprised. He said calmly, "Interesting." In the Despair Valley, the King of Trepidation let out a cold snort. "We're really lucky. However, this will only infuriate Grade even more." On the television screen, countless people saw Qin Wang stretch out his hand, and everything in the world seemed to come to a standstill. Countless people exclaimed at this strange scene. However, Qin Wang's expression was definitely not relaxed. In fact, after unleashing the world abides to the heart, his expression became increasingly grim. Droplets of cold sweat kept dripping down from his forehead. It was because under his control, the black air currents kept on struggling and even started to tremble slightly. Qin Wang could clearly sense a surge of soaring fury contained within them. At the next moment, 2 streams of blood flowed down from Qin Wang's eyes. He let out a stifled snort and retreated repeatedly. The space that had come to a standstill also returned to its original state. The endless black air currents came crashing down, as if wanting to tear apart all the matter in the hall. At that moment, Qin Wang brought out a ring. It was a gray-colored ring that was exuding soul-stirring ripples of power. As the ring appeared, the surrounding air trembled slightly, and a man's voice rang out. "That's enough, Grade. We'll just give you the Book of Wisdom this time around." The person who spoke was the Gray Army's leader, Hui He. Clearly, This strongest expert in the Grey Army was already able to control the ring's energy from several thousand leagues away. Even if Qin Wang were to hold onto his ring, he would be able to control the powers within it. His actual body could even borrow powers from several thousand leagues away, so it did not matter whether he was wearing the ring or not. Hearing the word black, the black air currents immediately stopped and were slowly absorbed into the black human figure. Hui's appearance seemed to have caused Grade to regain a hint of clarity, and his figure also became clearer. Foolish probing, Grade said coldly. Once I really lose control, it'll mean the deaths of several 100 million people. Hui, don't test my patience. Ha! Hui's voice rang out from the ring. Grade, I'm also worried for the safety of all mankind. Please understand our painstaking efforts. Grade trembled fiercely. It was as if he was a black hole, slowly drawing in the endless black aura into his body. He also turned into a young man who was wrapped up in black long robes and casually found a place to sit down. Where are the people from the White Army? How long more before they arrive? Hui instructed, give them a call and tell them to hurry up. Are they going to make so many of us wait for them? 20 minutes later, everyone in and out of the venue felt a little anxious. It was because hints of distortions and savageness kept flashing on Grade's face. It was as if he was going to lose control of the consciousness in his body soon. Hui had already left, and Qin Wang was still in charge of the Grey Army. Seeing Grade's situation, he immediately gave out instructions. Go and contact the people from the White Army again. What's going on with them? To think that they can be late under such circumstances? Just then, a Grey Army's warrior ran over and said, Sir, we've found the White Army's representative. Simultaneously, the various television stations kept on reporting the situation of the conference. Based on the latest information, the White Army's representative has yet to arrive. This might be the White Army expressing some dissatisfaction. After all, they don't have the capabilities to protect this page of the Book of Wisdom. Professor Loriton, the White Army's commander, has changed this time around. It said that the new commander, Fang Xinjian, has powers that surpass Priest Longmai's. Does he not have a right to snatch the Book of Wisdom either? In the live broadcast studio, a silver-haired middle-aged lady nodded and said, the current situation of the 13 armies can be said to be one where a slight change in one part will affect the overall situation. The White Army's influence is considered to be at the lower end of the 13 armies to begin with. Even if they change their commander this time around, it won't be of much use. As for the new commander, Fang Xinjian, his strength is even more of a mystery. However, my personal guess is that he might not be as powerful as everyone thinks. Chapter 924. Oh, why is that so? The female host asked. If he's really that amazing, why haven't we heard of him in the past? The female professor shook her head and said, it's very possible that he was pushed out by Priest Longmai as his successor. In order to build up support for him, Priest Longmai even sacrificed himself as a stepping stone. There's only one reason for such a situation. Priest Longmai's lifespan is probably coming to an end. Since then, not only has the White Army not gotten stronger, but it might even be weaker than before. The countless viewers in front of their televisions nodded silently, feeling that what the professor said made a lot of sense. The female professor continued. Moreover, the situation has already been decided. In order to maintain the stability of Commander Grade's situation, it's impossible for this page of the Book of Wisdom to be handed over to someone else. Handing this page of the Book of Wisdom to Grade has clearly been agreed upon by all the armies. Faced with such a situation, the White Army won't be able to reject it. With Grade's powers, once he goes crazy, it'll be like several thousand or 10,000 nuclear bombs going out of control. No one will be able to accept such an outcome. Therefore, I dare to bet that the new page of the Book of Wisdom will definitely be handed over to Grade. On the televisions, countless hosts, experts, and professors were analyzing the situation, reporting every single detail of the meeting. However, at the next moment, the images on the various television stations changed. Breaking news. The White Army's representative has been found. Right now, the White Army's representative is being escorted to the meeting venue. Will the White Army's representative be the new commander this time around? Is this new commander finally going to walk out from the mysteries? Outside the meeting venue, a black sedan came to a slow stop. Countless cameras were instantly aimed at the sedan, and everyone was waiting for the person to get out of the car. A short moment later, the car door opened, and a blonde young lady walked out slowly. It was the White Army's newcomer, Jessica. Her blonde hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was wearing a white priest robe. She looked like a fresh and refined little white flower. She was hugging a long sword in a silver scabbard. The long sword was completely silver in color, giving off an extremely sharp feeling. Jessica hugged the long sword with great force, as if it was her only reliance. As soon as Jessica appeared, countless TV stations frantically searched for her information. Hello, everyone. The person appearing on the screen is North America's famous daughter from a wealthy family, Jessica Lehman. No one would have expected that this North American queen, the fashion world's heavenly queen, would have passed the White Army's test. This time around, the White Army has sent out a newcomer. It seems that they've completely given up on the fight for the Book of Wisdom. In everyone's opinion, the White Army had completely given up. The reason why they had sent out a female disciple was probably because those seniors were unwilling to embarrass themselves. In a luxurious manner in North America, a middle-aged man looked at Jessica on the television screen in astonishment. Why did Jessica join the White Army? Jessica's mother said, "Isn't that great? Jessica has become a supernatural being. This is a good thing for the entire family." Jessica's younger brother smiled coldly and said, "How intense are the conflicts between the 13 armies? If she gets involved like this, she might bring harm to the entire family." Jessica's father sighed. The expression on his face was extremely complicated. He was happy and worried at the same time. Right now, Jessica was feeling extremely nervous. This time around, they were going to be facing the major characters from the other armies, and the White Army had sent her alone. How could she not be nervous? She could only hug the silver longsword tightly, still recalling the instructions Fong Xinjian had given her as she walked toward the meeting hall. Behind Jessica, the Grey Army's Major General Odom grabbed her arm and ran toward the meeting hall at high speed. "Everyone is waiting for you. Hurry up." Jessica's arm hurt from being dragged by him. She shouted, "Let go of me. You're hurting me." Odom let out a cold snort. "Do you know how many people are waiting for you? To think that the White Army has only sent you here alone, this is really..." He threw a cold glance toward Jessica, but did not say anything in the end. Then he dragged Jessica along and quickly walked into the meeting hall. Almost at the moment she walked into the meeting hall, everyone's gazes turned toward Jessica. Grade was the first to say, "Someone from the White Army? Where's the Book of Wisdom? Where's that page?" Everyone looked at Jessica, as if waiting for her to bring out that page from the Book of Wisdom. Having never been stared at by so many extraordinary humans before, Jessica also felt a little nervous. She hugged her longsword tightly and said softly, "I didn't bring it with me." "You didn't bring it?" Qin Wang looked at Jessica and said, a little displeased, "Is the White Army going to go back on its word? Could it be that you guys are thinking of keeping this page of the Book of Wisdom to yourself?" Grade's gaze narrowed, and he glared fiercely at Jessica with eyes that emitted a dangerous aura. Jessica gulped, feeling extremely nervous, and all the hair on her body seemed to be standing up. Only the feeling of coldness coming from the silver longsword seemed to give her a hint of confidence. Under the gazes of countless people and the pressure from Grade and Qin Wang, Jessica said, "Lord Fong Xinjian said that he wants this page of the Book of Wisdom. He also wants all the pages from the other books of wisdom." Arrogant. Hearing those words, Qin Wang frowned. The ferocious gleam on Grade's face burst out, and streams of black aura darted out from his body, causing countless people to panic. They were all afraid that he would go out of control. Therefore, countless people present glared at Jessica and scolded, "Are you guys crazy? Shut up and hand over the Book of Wisdom. What if Grade goes out of control again? Are you trying to get us killed?" In the North American continent, Jessica's family also fell into silence. After the earlier scene was broadcasted on the television, Jessica's father's face turned ice cold. Jessica's younger brother's face was filled with horror. Damn it, this foolish woman. What's she doing? Our entire clan is going to die because of her. In the hall, Great had already stood up. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang immediately stood up as well. He rushed up to Jessica and said furiously, "Shut up. Do you know that you've gotten into great trouble?" In the distance, black aura kept on extending out from Grade's body, and there seemed to be countless people bellowing in void space. Jessica was like a delicate white flower, shivering when faced with the prowess of the two experts. Countless people in front of their television sets were scolding Jessica for being foolish and the White Army for being selfish. Despite this, she still remembered Fong Xinjian's instructions and placed the silver longsword on the ground respectfully. Qin Wang frowned and asked, "What are you trying to do?" Jessica did not reply. She just put her palms together and said respectfully, "Please unsheathe your treasure." Chapter 925. Everyone who saw this scene was slightly stunned. They did not understand why Jessica would be so respectful and serious towards a long sword. She even prayed and kowtowed, performing the proper etiquette. Just when everyone was puzzled, a soft sound came from the longsword. The silver longsword lying on the ground moved slowly without any visible force. It moved out of the scabbard and revealed a trace of silver light. The king of Qin narrowed his eyes and glanced at the long sword in bewilderment. However, he could not sense any extraordinary power from the longsword. This was the truth. The longsword was Fong Xinjian's accompanying sword, one of the four great divine swords, the Panwei sword. In the beginning, this Panwei sword had been modified from the Mountainous dynasty's Panwu divine armor. Later on, Fong Xinjian's light pursuit sword intent was channeled into it. In terms of its foundation, it was the strongest out of the four divine swords. Later on, it was reforged by Fong Xinjian using the heavenly upper extremity sword physique. It possessed an almost indestructible body and could be said to be the strongest sword in the world. However, his body was not powered by the ring's energy, so it was no wonder that Qin Wang and the others could not sense how powerful it was. Seeing that the long sword had only moved out slightly from its scabbard and that there were no other abnormalities, the Grey Army's Major General Odom said coldly, trying to act mysterious, "Is the White Army thinking of relying on this lousy sword to protect the Book of Wisdom? Are you kidding me?" Another Major General from the Grey Army, McGraw, said, "Today is an important meeting for the White, Yellow, Black, and Grey Armies to discuss the whereabouts of the Book of Wisdom. However, the White Army isn't willing to hand over the Book of Wisdom and wants to keep this page to themselves. Isn't this against the rules?" As everyone spoke up one after another, more and more people stood out to criticize the White Army and Jessica. That's right. The White Army is completely breaking the rules by doing this. Originally, the purpose of holding a meeting to discuss and settle the ownership of each page of the Book of Wisdom peacefully was to reduce conflicts and ensure the safety of Earth. Right now, the White Army is hogging the pages for their own selfish reasons. What does this mean? You must hand over the Book of Wisdom. Otherwise, the White Army will become enemies with the other 12 armies. You guys are destroying the peace of the entire Earth. I strongly request for the White Army's new commander to come out and apologize. Right now, in order to fight against the negative emotions in his mind and prevent his powers from destroying Earth, Lord Grade has given up his entire life. Right now, only the Book of Wisdom can help him. To think that you guys want to monopolize it? What is his motive? All kinds of verbal attacks came one after another like a storm, and Jessica was the only one who endured it silently, like a small boat in front of a tsunami. Although the countless viewers in front of their televisions pitied the weak young lady, they could empathize with everyone's criticism. In their opinion, it was true that the White Army had destroyed Earth's stability and unity by refusing to hand over the Book of Wisdom for their own selfish reasons. Qin Wang, Grade, and the other army's commanders watched all of this silently. Of course, They were not hoping for any reaction from Jessica. Instead, they were waiting for the White Army's reaction. Qin Wang's gaze turned increasingly cold as he laughed coldly inwardly. White Army, are you guys just going to watch on like this? Are you trying to act shamelessly? Jessica also felt increasingly nervous. Although she had great trust in Fang Xingjian's abilities, just like the other members of the White Army, she was also worried if the longsword Fang Xingjian had casually given her would be able to protect her before so many important characters from the armies. Just then, the people present were not satisfied with just continuing to speak. A junior-level warrior from the Gray Army grabbed out, and gray energy turned into a palm that was the size of a small car, grabbing out toward Jessica. Since the White Army is so stubborn, then we'll capture you and bring you to the sacred White Crevice. We'll personally ask for the Book of Wisdom. Just as the gray palm was about to grab Jessica, the long sword that had been lying quietly on the ground suddenly moved. It floated up and blocked before Jessica. At the next moment, a silver sword light was unleashed from the longsword. A stream of sword light pierced through the air, mincing the gray palm into nothingness. The sword light did not stop and continued to slash out. The gray warrior who had made a move in the distance let out an agonizing cry. His body was swept through in that instant, and he fell to the ground while covered in blood. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment. It was as if they had not expected that the other party would deal a member of the Gray Army with serious injuries. At the sight of this scene, the Gray Army's Major General, McGraw, frowned and said furiously, "There are so many experts from the armies looking over here, yet you still dare to commit murder here? Is the White Army really going to make an enemy out of the other 12 armies?" Jessica lowered her head silently, and her entire body was encompassed by the silver sword light. "We won't be handing over the Book of Wisdom. If you guys want to take it, then come and take it yourself. But we'll kill whoever makes a move." Ridiculous. McGraw let out a cold snort, and gray light burst out. Streams of gray light turned into many light swords that pierced out toward Jessica like a meteor shower. A myriad of gray light swords shot out, and the Panway longsword trembled slightly. A sword cry rang out, and a light sword shot out explosively from the Panway longsword. In that instant, the myriad of light swords shattered, and the sword light swept through McGraw's body, slashing his body at the waist. With a sound, McGraw's upper body fell to the ground, and blood spurted out from his lower body like a fountain, creating a blood flower that reached over 3 meters high. At the sight of this scene, the eyes of all the Gray Army's warriors turned bloodshot. It was as if blood was going to drip out from their eyes. How long had it been? Ever since the 1-3 agreement was signed, it had been a long time since there had been a battle to the death between the 13 armies on Earth. Although there would occasionally be fights and conflicts, under the suppression of the 13 commanders, there had never been any deaths among the army's warriors. To think that someone had killed a major general from the Gray Army before the several billion people on Earth. How could the people from the Gray Army not be infuriated? The Witch of Trepidation also revealed an astonished expression. These people from the White Army are too daring. Are they crazy? Right now, she was looking at Jessica with a gaze filled with pity. This woman is dead meat. I wonder how the people from the Gray Army will execute her. Audacious. They're really audacious. At the top floor of the world's tallest building, the heaven-connecting tower, the eyes of the Gray Army's leader, Hui He, were also filled with fury. This woman must die. Simultaneously, all the Gray Army's warriors in the hall unleashed their Gray Ring energies without needing Hui's orders. They turned into all sorts of firearms, sabers, swords, huge palms, wild beasts, and other means of attack that they were familiar with. They smashed out toward Jessica. Chapter 926. One had to pay the price for killing the members of the Gray Army. Amongst the many warriors in the Gray Army, only Qin Wang remained calm. Although he was also furious at the other party's vicious means, he could tell that the silver sword was extraordinary. Right now, he was going all out, looking at everyone's attacks, ready to make a move at any moment to fend off the silver sword's counterattack. the gray energy materialized into various means of attack. There were modernized rocket launchers, extremely sharp blades that could slice through tanks, huge dragons, elephants, and all sorts of wild beasts with great strength and great toughness that could charge against armored troops. There was also a huge palm with an extremely condensed gray glow that had the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and the circulation of the Milky Way carved on it. Each of these warriors in the Gray Army had different cultural backgrounds and ethnic lineages. Therefore, the methods they used to materialize energy for battle were also different. However, there was one thing they all had in common. They were all similarly powerful. Right now, when they joined forces to attack, the prowess they unleashed could turn the buildings on an entire street into dregs. Looking at the incoming attacks, Jessica closed her eyes, and her body started to tremble slightly. Although she trusted Feng Xingjian, she was just an ordinary person previously. Right now, she was unable to maintain her calm when facing the attacks from so many extraordinary powers. At the instant she closed her eyes, the Panwei sword once again trembled slightly. A stream of silver sword light shot out from the sword, piercing through the air like a laser beam. It shot out a distance of several hundred meters, passing through layers of walls and arriving in the sky outside the building. At the next moment, the laser-like sword light suddenly swept out. Wherever the sword light passed by, the rocket launchers would be crushed, and the gray blades would be split into two, dissipating in the air. The ferocious and enraged huge beasts were sliced into pieces like cheese, turning into light spots that filled up the sky. The huge gray palm was completely shattered. Almost in the blink of an eye, the overwhelming attacks were broken by this stream of sword light. Everyone's hearts thumped furiously. However, the sword light did not stop at all. It continued to slash out toward the Gray Army's warriors. At this moment, Qin Wang finally reacted. "How dare you?" As he shouted, gray energy surged out from his body. Everything abides to the heart was activated once again, and the space seemed to be frozen inch by inch. Wherever the energy tide passed by, everything would come to a standstill. However, when the frozen space extended out toward the sword light, the light pursuit sword, which the Panwei sword had shot out, was not affected at all. It swept out and sliced through the gray energy currents. It was like a table knife slicing through tofu. In the blink of an eye, another 5 warriors from the Gray Army were slashed at the waist. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang's eyes were filled with rage. The gray energy abruptly condensed, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a drill that was the size of a train. The drill spun violently, bringing about extremely violent gales that blew away the mortals in the surroundings. It was as if they were ants being blown away, and all of them crashed into the walls. The gray drill let out a sonic boom and shot toward Jessica at over 10 times the speed of sound. Right now, Qin Wang was really infuriated. Not knowing the background of the silver sword and not being able to stop it, he chose to kill Jessica to save the remaining warriors from the Gray Army. The extremely large drill that was condensed from gray energy could instantly drill a big hole through an aircraft carrier and sink it. Right now, it was being used to deal with an extremely weak girl. The contrast between the two of them was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. However, just then, another stream of silver sword light shot out from the Panwei sword, sweeping out toward the huge drill that Qin Wang had released. The weak sword light looked like an ordinary laser light. When it swept across the ferocious drill, one could not sense any prowess from it at all. However, regardless of whether it was the Witch of Trepidation, Grade, or anyone else who was watching this battle, none of them would underestimate the prowess of this stream of sword light. However, they had not expected that this sword light was even more terrifying than they had imagined. At the next instant, the drill that had been swept by the sword light suddenly shattered. It was as if it had been slashed by countless sharp swords, turning into fragments that filled the air. Then it shattered once again, turning into countless light spots and dissipating completely. Immediately after, Qin Wang retreated crazily. It was because the sword light that represented death and destruction was already sweeping toward his body. rumble. It was as if several hundred elephants were moving at the same time. With Qin Wang's explosive retreat, he immediately knocked away countless walls and steel bars, causing the entire hall to tremble. Countless ordinary people were thrown off their feet. Amidst Qin Wang's explosive retreat, streams of gray energy turned into all sorts of sabers, spears, and staffs, attacking the sword light at a speed that was over 10 times that of supersonic speed. However, no matter what kind of attacks they were all slashed apart when they arrived before the sword light. It was as if there was nothing in the world that could fend off this sword light. It was useless, useless, useless. No matter what kind of attack it was, it seemed to be meaningless before this stream of sword light. That stream of sword light seemed to be deliberately toying with Qin Wang, slashing out toward him slowly, inch by inch. It made him feel a terror, as if he had no control over his life. At this moment, a hint of terror finally flashed in Qin Wang's eyes. However, just then, the gray ring that he was carrying with him soared into the air, and an unimaginable amount of gray energy extended out like the mountains and seas. It was like gray seawater, instantly engulfing the space within a range of 1,000 meters. In the center of this gray seawater, an extremely dense stream of gray energy gathered to form a human figure. It was the Gray Army's leader, Hui He. With the help of his ring that Qin Wang was carrying, this strongest expert in the Gray Army had traversed several thousand lis and descended across space. At the instant he appeared, he put out one of his hands and made an interception motion. The stream of sword light that was slashing out toward Qin Wang was encompassed by countless gray light rays and gradually came to a stop. Countless people were astonished at the sight of this scene. The sword light, which had slashed through everything from the moment it appeared and was almost invincible, was still stopped by Hui He. Hui He, the Gray Army's commander. Is he going to make a move as well? If Fang Xingjian were here, he would be able to discover that the power that Hui He displayed was about at Tier 4 of the divine level. However, the most amazing thing was that his power had already reached the microscopic level. This was why he was able to fend off the light pursuit sword. Hui's face was filled with killing intent, and his eyes were filled with fury. It was because at the same time that he descended, all of the other Gray Army's warriors had already been killed. Fang Xingjian, to think that you dare to kill members of our Gray Army. We won't let this matter rest just like that. Hearing Hui's words, everyone understood what was going on. That was right. Other than a commander-level character taking action personally, how could ordinary people possibly be able to kill the members of the Gray Army as if they were cutting melons and vegetables? It was naturally the White Army's commander, Fang Xingjian. He had transmitted power across space like Hui he had done, and what he was relying on was that silver longsword. Concurrently, Hui turned to look in Grade's direction and said with a cold snort, "Grade, this is your book of wisdom. Are you just going to look at it like this?" Grade let out a loud laugh, but his eyes were fixed on the Panway sword that was floating before Jessica. His eyes were filled with greed. The Black Army's power came from their greed. With this power, they had the desire to take over everything and own everything. Right now, the divine remains equipment, which had never appeared on Earth before, immediately aroused Grade's greed. "It's mine. This long sword is mine." Accompanied by a maniacal laugh, he suddenly dissipated, turning into endless black smoke that appeared before the Panway sword. He then grabbed out with his hand and grabbed onto the Panway sword's hilt. However, at the instant he grabbed onto the sword hilt, Grade saw a pair of eyes. The gaze in the eyes was like sword light, piercing straight into his soul. At the next moment, Grade, who was holding onto the sword's hilt, let out an agonizing cry and retreated 7 steps. With each step he retreated, the black smoke on his body would explode like sparks, revealing his naked figure. He looked at the Panway sword that was still floating slowly in midair with a horrified expression. Chapter 9:27. Everyone present looked at this scene in great astonishment. No one had expected that Grade, who was the fiercest and the craziest among the 13 commanders, would be injured in just one exchange. It seemed that the White Army's new commander, Fang Xinjian, was much more amazing than they had imagined. At the sight of this scene, a hint of solemnity flashed in Hui's eyes. However, at this moment, how could they possibly back off before the several billion people in the world? Moreover, they would only know the outcome after they fought. After all, both he and Grade had yet to unleash their full powers. Therefore, just as Grade was pushed back by the attack, Hui also made a move. This time around, he also performed the world abides to the heart. However, its prowess was over 10 times stronger than the world abides to the heart performed by Qin Wang. The wind and clouds stopped moving, and the air became still. Many dust particles froze in midair, and it was as if the pause button had been pressed on everyone and everything. Wherever the gray energy passed by, everything would be sealed up, and the world would come to a standstill. All the movements in the microscopic world seemed to be extremely close to true stillness. The sealed-up space extended out toward the Panwei sword, and a tremendous amount of gray light instantly encompassed the Panwei sword. Seal! As Hui let out a cold snort, the gray light formed many long gray bandages, wrapping up the Panwei sword from top to bottom. Almost every single one of these death bandages, which were created through microscopic means, had characteristics that surpassed that of aviation materials. They could exist stably in most hellish environments, and even a pulling force of several 100,000 tons would not be able to damage them in the slightest. Then a huge gray coffin descended from the sky, slowly sucking the long sword that was wrapped up by the bandages into it. The interior of the gray coffin was pitch black, as if it was connected to another alternate dimension. Even if one were to use any detection means from modern technology, they would not be able to see through the situation inside. The entire process was as fast as lightning, and it was completed almost in the blink of an eye. By the time everyone reacted, the silver longsword had already been wrapped up by layers of bandages and was being sucked into the coffin inch by inch. As if sensing danger, the entire silver longsword trembled abruptly, wanting to break free from the coffin's suction. Hui smiled coldly and pushed out his palm. A huge pure gray hand suddenly materialized. The gray hand seemed as if it had real flesh and blood, and each of its veins and blood vessels were extremely exquisite. A majestic power burst out from it, bringing forth strong gales that sent the hall's roof, which weighed over 1 million tons, flying. The palm struck the sword and was about to push it into the coffin. Just then, a myriad of sword light shot out from the Panwei sword. Earlier on, the Panwei sword had only unleashed 1 or 2 streams of sword light, yet they had already caused the Grey Army to be in utter disarray. They found it hard to fend off the attacks. At this moment, when a myriad of sword light flashed simultaneously, a hint of astonishment flashed on Hui's face. Pucci! 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 The death bandage was the first to shatter, turning into dust that floated into the sky. The sword light did not stop there. It directly pierced through the giant gray palm print, as if it had been dismembered by countless sharp blades. The gray palm print exploded into fragments that filled the sky. At the same time, the gray coffin behind it also exploded, turning into fragments that filled the sky. After breaking through Hui's seal in an instant, the myriad of sword light did not stop there. They suddenly gathered into a single point and attacked Hui. Hui let out a furious bellow, and the sealed space of the world abides to the heart contracted abruptly, turning into a gray circle of light that was the size of a basketball and clashed out toward the sword light. As the sealed space of the world abides to the heart shrank, its strength also kept on increasing. When it reached the size of a basketball, almost all the microscopic particles in it had stopped moving, and its temperature reached an unprecedented negative 260 degrees Celsius. It was the zero seal, an ultimate technique that Hui had created after stepping into the microscopic domain. At the next moment, the light pursuit sword's sword light collided fiercely with the zero seal's light circle. Without a sound, the light circle collapsed, and the sword light flashed by, piercing a large hole in the body that Hui had formed. Amidst an agonizing cry, Hui's body shattered abruptly, and endless gray energy dissipated. Then it slowly formed a new body. Right now, he was looking at the Panway, sword with a gaze filled with great wariness. Where on earth did this Feng Xinjiang come from? That stream of sword light from earlier has an unfathomable understanding toward the world, technology, and truth. Seeing that he was unable to take down Hui he single-handedly, he let out a low bellow, causing the air to tremble. He said to Grade, "Grade, what are you still standing there for? Let the tack together and suppress him." The black air currents that Grade had dissipated earlier had now once again extended out from his body. The terror in his eyes gradually dissipated, replaced by endless greed and desire. Although an unknown power had injured him at the instant he came into contact with the Panway sword, and even left behind an extremely horrified emotion in his body, greed was Grade's nature. It was his instinct, something that was engraved into his bones, and it was the cries of countless consciousnesses. Therefore, within a short period of time, the greed in his heart won over that feeling of horror. Moreover, due to the uniqueness of the Panway sword, the greed in his heart was unprecedented. Waves of black chi rose up from the surface of his body like many bubbles, and he seemed to have become stronger once again. His eyes, which were encompassed by the black chi, glared at the silver sword and Jessica. He bellowed as if he had gone mad. "Hand over this sword and the Book of Wisdom. They're all mine." As he spoke, the black chi swelled up once again, and a myriad of wills bellowed out in void space. Many black souls flew out incessantly from Grade's body and then pounced out toward Jessica. They bellowed loudly, and their eyes were filled with black light. Endless greed and desire appeared in them, as if they wanted to engulf everything in this world. These were the greedy souls that Grade had released from his body. Each of these souls was a member of the Black Army. Due to their greedy powers engulfing each other, they had been suppressed in Grade's body all this while. Now that they were released by Grade at one go, it was as if the entire Black Army had descended from the sky. Faced with the overwhelming amount of greedy souls, the Panway sword trembled slightly once again, and a myriad of sword light instantly clashed with the souls. However, this time around, the sword light that could slash through everything was not as effective. Each of the souls bit out greedily toward the sword light that was shooting out toward them. They started to engulf the sword light bit by bit. Seeing that both parties were in a stalemate, Hui made his move once again. Hui clenched his right hand abruptly. This simple action of clenching his fist seemed to have absorbed all of the brilliant light in the world into it. A state as if he was in control of the world and looking down on the world seethed out, causing one to be unable to help but drop to their knees and worship him. Chapter 928. At the next instant, he simply sank his elbows, became one with his waist and horse, and smashed out a punch. However, it brought about a change in the world. The fist's name was domination. Hui's unrivaled domineering will and ambition to control the world activated the great energy in the ring, unleashing 200% of its prowess. The 13-colored ring was a power that was activated by one's will to begin with. Previously, Hui's world to the heart was an application of energy. However, the domination fist was a punch that truly activated the power, condensing the domineering, awe-inspiring, and ambitious aura that Hui had accumulated over several decades to rule over millions and millions of humans. This was a punch that used pure power to suppress everything in the world that refused to submit. Under this punch, the sword light shattered, no longer able to fend off Hui. The two surges of power, one gray and one black, completely suppressed the myriad of sword light. They compressed the light circle formed by the sword light inch by inch, suppressing it to a radius of 3 meters. Under everyone's gaze, the gray fist force and the black souls pressed down explosively on the Panway longsword, causing the light sword to only be able to maintain a radius of 3 meters. It was still trembling incessantly, as if it would collapse at any moment. It was like an ordinary person who was being pressed down by two huge mountains, unable to move at all. At the sight of this scene, the Witch of Trepidation, who had initially maintained an astonished expression, let out a breath. She thought, this Feng Xingjian is really amazing. It's a pity that he wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, but he chose the wrong opponent and underestimated their determination. How can he possibly be a match for Hui, he, and Grade when they join forces? In the television broadcast studio, the silver-haired female professor, Loretta, sighed and said, "It's true that the White Army's new commander, Feng Xingjian, is stronger than what I had guessed previously. However, this person is obstinate and self-opinionated. He doesn't understand the current situation on Earth. The 1-3 agreement was jointly set by the 13 commanders back then. How can he overturn alone?" The host asked, "Professor Loretta, as an international relations expert, what do you think the outcome of this meeting will be? Will there be a second war between the armies?" Professor Loretta fell silent for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "That shouldn't be the case. Right now, Earth still has external threats. The 13 commanders also understand that this is definitely not the time for internal strife. This time around, the White Army will be the unlucky ones." Sigh. She sighed and said, "Feng Xingjian has probably brought the entire White Army into the abyss." After hearing Professor Loretta's analysis, countless spectators nodded in agreement. In a manor in the North American continent, Jessica's father watched the content on the television and sat on a chair dejectedly. His face was filled with despair. Beside him, his wife and son were already in a state of panic. The son shouted, "Dad, what should we do? Hurry up and run. What are you still doing here?" Jessica's father shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Escape? Where can we run to? Which part of Earth was not under the control of the army? We can't escape." Jessica's brother cried, "What's wrong with that? Daddy, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. The Gray Army won't let us off." In outer space, the Gold Army's leader, Edward, looked coldly at the live broadcast. He let out a soft snort and said, "Idiots." Most of the ordinary people in the hall had retreated a long time ago, leaving behind only the live broadcast camera and a few extraordinary humans. Right now, the gray and black forces pressed down once again, suppressing the sword light to a range of 1 meter and protecting Jessica tightly. At the sight of this scene, Hui felt that the outcome was already set and was unwilling to expend more energy. Therefore, he said directly, "Feng Xingjian, are you still going to resist? It's impossible for you to be a match for the both of us with your powers alone. You should be proud that you forced the two of us to join forces to take you down." However, while Hui wanted to conserve his energy and force Feng Xingjian to surrender, Grade would not do this. Dominated by greed and desire, he had no rationality left. "Give me the sword." With a bellow from Grade, a myriad of black souls gushed forth, each of them opening their mouths and engulfing the sword light. Kacha-kacha sounds kept ringing out, and the souls gnawed on the sword light until it trembled and even started to break down. At the sight of this scene, an extremely horrified expression appeared on Jessica's face. However, she still maintained the most basic level of rationality as she recalled Feng Xingjian's instructions to her. "This sword is sufficient to protect your life usually, but if you encounter a dangerous situation..." Jessica lowered her head and put her palms together. Although she looked horrified, she still wore a basic expression of respect. "Darling, please turn around." In that instant, an endless amount of sword light was unleashed from the Panway sword. If it was said that the 1, 2, and then the myriad of sword light earlier could still give one a rough estimate of the number of sword light, then right now, the amount of sword light unleashed by the Panway sword was already uncountable. Right now, the Panway sword was like a sun that had risen up into the sky. Endless sword light was unleashed, forming its glow. It was only at this moment that the Panway sword unleashed the true prowess of the light pursuit sword intense in the sword. Wherever the sword light passed by, everything in the world would evaporate. Grade's greedy dead souls were the first to be affected. The myriad of dead souls dissipated under the piercing of the sword light, melting like snow that had been enveloped by sunlight. Grade let out an agonizing cry, and a large part of his body dissipated as he retreated rapidly. Escape. Right now, there were no longer any desires or greed in Grade's heart. The only thing he had was endless terror. Right now, there was only a single thought in his heart, and that was to escape. He wanted to escape far, far away, so far away that he would never have to see this sword light ever again. Hui's countenance changed. Faced with the gushing sword light, he struck out with his domination fist. However, the domination fist, which had dominated the world and destroyed everything in the world, was crushed into ashes under the myriad of sword light. Hui punched out 9 times consecutively. However, each time his punch came into contact with the sword light, his energy body would collapse and then regenerate. After punching out 9 times consecutively, his energy body collapsed 9 times and finally dissipated into the air completely. All that was left behind was a gray ring that cut across the sky and flew out 1,000 lis away. As for Qin Wang and the Witch of Trepidation, they were completely vaporized the moment they came into contact with the sword light. Their entire physical bodies were struck by the omnipresent photon currents, turning into microscopic particles that dissipated into the world. After the sword light disappeared, within a range of 300 meters, not only had the entire hall disappeared, but over 10 meters of the ground had also been vaporized. With Jessica as the center, there was nothing left within a range of 300 meters. The live broadcast also disappeared for an instant, and then it was switched to the cameras outside the hall. The several billion spectators watched in silence as they saw that there was nothing left before them. They had been completely vaporized, leaving behind only Jessica and the silver longsword. At the next moment, the entire world was shaken. Chapter 929. The sword light dissipated, and the Gray Army's leader, Hui He, retreated with serious injuries. His remaining powers disappeared along with his ring. The Black Army's leader, Grade, seemed to have been turned into dust. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive, and his whereabouts could not be seen. This scene on the TV live broadcast could be said to have shocked the eyes of countless viewers. However, Jessica did not care about all these. Looking at this scene, a hint of an admiring smile appeared on her face. She felt an increasingly heartfelt admiration for Fang Xingjian's cultivation. It was as if she was looking at a high mountain and flowing water. She bowed toward the Panwei sword. Then she was encompassed by sword light and flew out in the direction of the Kunlun Mountains. She left behind over 10,000 spectators who watched in a daze as her silhouette disappeared into the horizon. In the television station's live broadcast studio, Professor Loretta was dumbfounded. The female host at the side said hesitantly, "Professor, this is..." Fang Xingjian repelled the joint attacks of the two commanders. She looked at this scene in disbelief. Professor Loretta was also stunned for a moment. It seems so. She recalled her earlier confident judgment and said a little awkwardly, "No one would have expected that Fang Xingjian would be able to take on two commanders single-handedly." She then sighed and revealed a deep look of worry. But his actions will probably bring about a great upheaval to the entire Earth. The world is going to change. In North America, in the manor, Jessica's family, who had been in despair and seemed to be at the end of their rope, was now looking at the scene on the television with a hint of ecstasy on their faces. He won. Jessica's father suddenly laughed out loud in pleasant surprise. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Jessica's choice back then was really right. Lord Fang Xingjian defeated the two commanders single-handedly. With this backing, there's no need for our clan to worry about not being able to rise up. He then stood up abruptly. This won't do. I have to buy plane tickets to the Kunlun Mountains immediately. If we're late, we probably won't have a share. Jessica's younger brother also relaxed, but when he heard his father's words, he couldn't help but mutter, "Dad, do you have to be in such a hurry to suck up to them?" Although he has won now, he has offended both the Gray Army and the Black Army. Moreover, he has killed so many people in one go and will definitely be besieged by the other armies to make things difficult for him. If he goes now, he might just end up as cannon fodder. Jessica's father was taken aback for a moment, then nodded. You're right. I was too impatient. Since that's the case, let's wait a little longer and see what attitude the 13 armies have toward this matter. Just as Jessica's father was making the decision, the Gold Army's commander, Edward, was watching the entire battle from a faraway space station above the atmospheric layer. When he saw that both he and Grade were pushed back, the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. Hints of golden light flashed to and fro in void space as his emotions changed. He mumbled, "Interesting. Another character has finally appeared on this planet." As he spoke, he once again buried his head in a laboratory in the space station. It was as if no matter how great the things that happened on Earth were, they would not be able to attract his attention. In the European direction, in the ancient castle in the Despair Mountain Range, the Yellow Army's leader, the King of Trepidation, looked at the live broadcast on the screen and laughed out loud. The Abomination's sovereign, who seemed to be stitched together, said, "What's wrong, brother? Why are you still laughing? That Feng Xinjian has killed the witch. So what if one person died?" The King of Trepidation stood up, and a tremendous amount of spiritual chi of trepidation spread out with his movements, causing panic within a range of several hundred leagues. Countless agonizing cries pierced through the sky, as if they had sunk into the deepest part of a nightmare. "A great opportunity has come. Can't you see it?" The King of Trepidation smiled coldly and said, "Feng Xinjian has broken the stalemate. It's impossible for the Grey Army to compromise, and a great battle is unavoidable. From now on, Earth will gradually be in chaos, and we can finally spread fear without any restraints. Is there a better opportunity to spread fear than war?" Darkness Current, who was covered in yellow robes, said, "In that case, we should thank Feng Xinjian properly. Of course, we should thank him properly." The King of Trepidation revealed a hint of a brutal smile. "I'll get him to give him the most terrifying nightmare in the world and let him feel my gratitude." In the sky above East Asia, a stream of invisible and colorless air currents flashed by. In the middle of the air currents was a black ring, and the ring kept flying without a trace. Eventually, it landed in a dense forest deep in the mountains. At the next moment, the air currents slowly changed in color. In the blink of an eye, they turned into a lump of pitch-black smoke that encompassed the ring. It looked as if someone had scattered a lump of ink in the air. The smoke then slowly condensed into a form, taking on Grade's appearance. Right now, hints of lingering fear still flashed on Grade's face. The Panway sword's final round of sword light seemed to have been engraved in his mind, constantly making him experience the feeling of terror. However, as he slowly sensed his current situation, a hint of astonishment flashed on his face. Then an uncontrollable ecstasy rose in his eyes. It was because he discovered that although the series of sword light from earlier had shattered 99% of the ring's powers, it had also wiped out all the greedy souls he had released. Due to the Black Ring's powers being the wills of countless Black Army's warriors, these greedy souls were tightly bound together with his will. They also possessed the characteristic of engulfing everything in the world. He had only managed to wipe out 1/3 of them despite coming up with all sorts of means over the years. However, right now, there was no longer any other consciousness in his body. The engulfing souls had been completely wiped out. At this moment, all of the Black Ring's powers would be enjoyed by him alone. There were no longer those endless arguments and shouts in his mind, and he felt an unprecedented sense of relaxation. The black energy in the ring was gushing out incessantly. He had never felt that it would be so easy to use these powers. There were no longer any obstructions or restraints. Although 99% of the ring's powers he had used previously had been wiped out, as long as he had the Black Ring, he would be able to recover very quickly. He could even take another step forward and grasp even greater powers than before. As the black energy continued to gush into his body, the greedy desires seethed increasingly, causing his body to tremble slightly. The image of the Panway sword kept on seething in Grade's mind. "That sword, I want that sword, I want him." Chapter 9:30. Endless desires seethed incessantly in Grade's body. As these intense desires seethed, the ring's energies that he could borrow also grew increasingly stronger. As the ring's energies in his body grew increasingly stronger, his desires also grew increasingly intense. There had never been a moment when he wanted something so intensely. However, without the side effects of engulfing the souls of the dead, he still maintained the last hint of rationality at the bottom of his heart, despite being almost engulfed by his greedy desires. The current me is still not a match for him. The corners of Grade's lips curled up into a hint of an excited smile. But it's fine. After I snatch all of them, you'll be able to get back my sword. The image of the 13 colored rings flashed in his mind, and the greed in his eyes grew even stronger. Just as Grade was silently increasing his powers, a gray light flashed past the top floor of the world's tallest building in the extreme north, the heaven-connecting tower that symbolized the Gray Army's rule. It was Hui's ring, which had traversed several thousand lis and returned to his side. Looking at the ring before him, Hui's countenance was extremely grim. Compared to Grade, who had used the engulfing souls of the dead to fend off the calamity for himself, he was not so lucky. He had taken on an attack from the Panway sword head-on. Although he had not gone over with his physical body, he had used his will to cross a distance of several thousand lis with the help of the ring's energies. This attack had dealt his will serious injuries. Most of the warriors in the 13 armies still maintained their mortal bodies. They could only circulate the ring's energies or be like Grade, who had only left behind their consciousness. Their bodies were completely formed from the ring's energies. Only then would they not be afraid of physical attacks. The circulation of the ring's energies depended on one's temperament and will. It did not matter how much of the ring's energies were depleted from the collisions of energies and all sorts of attacks. It was because these energies came from different rings, and they would recover on the next day. Only the damage to their will would cause their strength to drop tremendously. It was because after their will was damaged, the amount of energy they could draw from the rings would be reduced, and the recovery speed of their will would be extremely slow. Grade's luck was good. He had used the engulfing souls of the dead to negate the damage from this sword attack. Although he had depleted a tremendous amount of energy, his will was almost unharmed. This was also a blessing in disguise. He had single-handedly taken over the entire Black Army's ring's energies. However, Hui was not so lucky. Right now, his will was seriously injured, and his entire brain was aching as if someone had shoved a nail into it. The energy that he could draw from the ring's energies had also been reduced by at least half. Sensing the condition of his body, his expression became even more gloomy. Fang Xingjian, you've won this round. The next round won't be so easy. After saying that, he waved his hand and gestured to the secretary beside him, saying, "Inform all the commanders of the other armies that I want to call for a Level 1 alert meeting." The secretary was stunned and said hesitantly, "Isn't it too serious?" A Class 1 alert conference was a conference that could only be held when the Legion commander discovered a crisis that concerned the survival of the entire Earth. This was a rule set by the 13 heroes after the first onslaught. But until now, this Level 1 alert meeting had only been held once. Hui let out a cold laugh and said, "Fang Xingjian violated the 1-3 agreement and killed a great general of our Gray Army, instigating a civil war in the army. Don't you understand the concept of a civil war? How could this not be a matter of life and death for the Earth? Then what is?" As the news of Fang Xingjian repelling Grade and Hui's joint forces spread across the entire world like a typhoon passing by, what followed was an extremely peaceful calm. It was like the calm before the storm. However, almost everyone understood that it was impossible for the Gray Army to back off just like that, and it was also impossible for Hui to end things with Fang Xingjian just like that. Therefore, everyone held their breaths, regardless of whether they were ordinary humans or extraordinary humans. They quietly waited for the arrival of the storm. Within a short few days, the international food prices kept on rising, and all sorts of rumors of war and world wars kept on spreading. Countless ordinary humans started to hoard food, water, electricity, and petroleum. It was as if they were waiting for the end of the world and for the era of wastelands to descend. A large number of wealthy people boarded private planes and flew toward the various military bases in various countries. They were like migratory birds that were moving. Even the most ignorant people seemed to gradually realize that a great change was about to arrive. In the various armies, countless warriors trained day and night, and all of them were in the highest state of alert. The various troops were gathered, and countless missions were forcefully paused. Even the lowest level warriors, privates, were gathered and were on standby at any moment. It was as if they were preparing to participate in a war. The various countries' governments were also on full alert. Many aircraft carriers and tanks were driven out, and almost all the countries were armed to the teeth at this moment. Country special forces are training and fighting in an extremely cold environment. The international food prices have once again reached a new high. The government is appealing to the citizens to purchase food rationally and not be incited by rumors. Over 20,000 people have arrived at the Kunlun Mountains to protest against the White Army's commander, Fang Xingjian's previous terrorist actions. Sea Country's replica T-98S submarine has been exposed. They are conducting a joint act with a country in the Pacific Ocean. The atmosphere across the entire Earth seemed to be getting increasingly tense. However, in the depths of the Kunlun Mountains, in the sacred White Crevice, everything was still in order. It was as if no one cared about the solemn atmosphere in the outside world. Fang Xingjian was floating in the hall, and a page of the Book of Wisdom was floating quietly before him. Countless data and words seemed to be flashing on it. After a long while, the page fell, and Fang Xingjian slowly exhaled. "I've finally completed another page." During the few days that he had been staying in the sacred White Crevice, Fang Xingjian had been deciphering the contents of the Book of Wisdom. After all, the White Army had a total of 12 pages of the Book of Wisdom, including Jessica's page. After deciphering one page, he put out his hand and beckoned, and another page floated before him. As Fang Xingjian stared at it, many lines of words appeared on the Book of Wisdom. A 100-meter-long troop was advancing. The messenger walked from the back of the line to the front, and then from the front to the back. This troop had advanced exactly 100 meters. It was known that the troop's speed and the messenger's speed remained the same. How many meters had the messenger walked? Mathematics? When he was deciphering the first few pages of the Book of Wisdom, Fang Xingjian discovered that each page of the Book of Wisdom had to answer questions in various domains. Moreover, as the questions were answered, the questions would get increasingly difficult. The first question on almost every page would be the easiest. After answering all the questions, he would be able to obtain the contents of this page of the Book of Wisdom. As the questions appeared, Fang Xingjian's brain started to circulate at high speed. His brain, which was comparable to that of a supercomputer, allowed him to easily solve these questions. Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the answers appeared on the Book of Wisdom. Then the next question appeared. As the questions got increasingly difficult, Fang Xingjian's gaze gradually turned grim. Chapter 9:31. As he went deeper into the analysis, the problems that appeared became more and more difficult. Even though Fang Xingjian had a brain that surpassed that of a supercomputer, he still felt a headache analyzing these problems, especially since many of the problems could no longer be solved with pure computing power. He had to invent some mathematical tools to solve them. Just like that, another 3 days passed by. Fang Xingjian was still analyzing this page of the Book of Wisdom. Suddenly, his gaze flickered, and he seemed to have sensed something. In fact, although Fang Xingjian had the sudden inspiration ability, it was impossible for him to sense it all the time. Usually, he would sense it once every morning and once every night. If there was anything, he would sense it carefully. If there was nothing, he would just forget about it. This time, it was obvious that something had happened. Fang Xingjian's gaze flickered, and he once again sent out a clone to appear outside the hall. It did not take long for Priest Longmai and Priest Tai to fly over. They descended from the sky and landed before Fang Xingjian. "My lord." Priest Longmai bowed toward Fang Xingjian. Right now, in his eyes, Fang Xingjian was the most unbelievable existence in the world who was the closest to the great Tao. Fang Xingjian glanced at them and asked, "What happened?" Mantai said indignantly, "Sir, Hui's called for a Class 1 alert recall. Right now, the Gray Army, as well as the Black Army, Red Army, Green Army, Yellow Army, Blue Army, Purple Army, Pink Army, and Orange Army have joined forces to ask you to confess. All the agents and families we've cultivated in the secular world, as well as all the major companies, have been seized." Mantai said angrily, "The most abominable thing is that the two disciples who were sent out to purchase supplies were also detained by them. Even though they were from the White Army, their physical bodies were still that of ordinary humans. Even though they cultivated daily, they still needed to eat. They also had their own families, relatives, and friends that they needed to take care of. Therefore, the White Army naturally had its own influence in the secular world. They also needed to frequently send people out from the sacred White Crevice to purchase and store up resources. However, they had not expected that the Gray Army would act so quickly this time around, sealing up all of their influences and even detaining the disciples who had gone out to purchase items." "Confess?" Fang Xingjian raised his eyebrows and said, "What else did they do?" "The 9 legions have made a joint decision," Priest Tai said with an extremely grim countenance. "I request that our White Army surrender completely within 3 days, hand over all the rings, and open up the sacred White Crevice. I also request that you go to the Tower of Babel alone to plead guilty and report on your work. The 9 commanders will conduct a joint trial on you." As he spoke, Mantai added, "Sir, you must not go over. They're up to no good this time. If you go, you will definitely be besieged by them." Although in the hearts of the people from the White Army, Fang Xingjian was already an existence that was extremely close to the great Tao and possessed the strongest powers on earth, they still felt a little terrified at the thought of going up against the 9 armies at one go. The 13 armies had ruled over Earth for countless years, and their authority and power had long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Right now, other than the white, silver, gold, and cyan armies, the other 9 armies had joined forces and made a joint decision to punish the White Army. This made everyone feel as if the sky was going to collapse. Priest Longmai added, "That's right. Sir, we can hold our ground in the sacred White Crevice. This is a small world that is isolated from the outside world. It won't be so easy for them to attack our way in. Moreover, as long as the people from our White Army are in the sacred White Crevice, we'll be able to unleash even stronger powers than before." Hearing that, Fang Xingjian merely smiled and did not reply immediately. Instead, he lifted his head, and a divine gleam flashed in his eyes. It was as if he had seen through void space and was looking toward space-time that was extremely far away. It was only after a long while that he nodded. "So that's how it is." Priest Longmai and Priest Tai exchanged a glance, feeling that Fang Xingjian's actions were becoming increasingly unfathomable. Fang Xingjian seemed to have understood something. He turned to look at Priest Longmai and said, "Since that's the case, then give them my answer." Simultaneously, the news of the 9 armies joining forces to exert pressure, requesting for the White Army to make a complete change and for the commander to come to the Tower of Babel within 3 days to receive a joint trial had spread throughout the entire world. Countless news media and online media started to report on this matter. Countless people turned their gazes toward the Kunlun Mountains in East Asia, guessing how the White Army would deal with this. They can only surrender. In a program with the highest viewership ratings in North America, the silver-haired Professor Loretta said resolutely, "No one in the world will be able to go up against the 9 armies joining forces. If the White Army wishes to continue passing down its legacy, they have no other choice but to surrender." Opposite her, a Caucasian professor shook his head and said, "That might not be the case. The White Army has a long legacy, and they all have the heart to pursue the Tao. Almost none of them fear death. If Fang Xingjian insists on hiding in the sacred White Crevice and putting up a stubborn resistance, then I don't think the 9 armies will be able to do anything." As time goes on, the 9 armies will have their own thoughts to begin with. It's impossible for them to keep on joining forces. Nonsense. Even idiots like him can appear in the spotlight now. Professor Loretta retorted. The White Army has always been at the bottom amongst the 13 armies. Even if Fang Xinjiang can single-handedly defeat 2 commanders, can he possibly go up against 9 commanders? Moreover, you don't understand the essence of this matter at all. That Caucasian professor said furiously, "You're being unreasonable. The 13 armies are the same breadth and branch. It's impossible for them to really fight to the death. To think that someone like you can become a professor. I'm worried for the education of the country's next generation." Professor Loretta did not give the other party a chance to speak at all. She interrupted and said, "The most crucial problem in this matter is that Fang Xinjiang has broken the rules and killed someone from the Grey Army. The 1-3 agreement is an iron rule, a bottom line, and the foundation for the 13 armies to unite and fight against external enemies together. Right now, what Fang Xinjiang is doing, to put it nicely, it's just an internal conflict. To put it bluntly, he's shaking the foundation of the entire planet and humanity. What he's doing is going against humanity and society, destroying the stability and unity of the entire Earth. Faced with such a situation, the 9 armies will definitely not back down. Although the Silver Army and Gold Army didn't say anything, not saying anything is already a tacit agreement. The White Army and Fang Xinjiang have no other choice but to lower their heads. Otherwise, he'll be the enemy of all of humanity. As Professor Loretta finished speaking, a series of applause rang out, suppressing the voices of the few professors and experts who wanted to rebut. Chapter 9:32. In Jessica's family's villa, Jessica's father was frowning, wearing a wretched expression. Looking at the program on the television, he could not help but say, "All right, what's so good about this lousy program? Quickly turn it off." Jessica's mother said angrily, "Can I watch the program and watch the news?" Listen to Professor Loretta's analysis. If the two of you were half as good as he is, our family wouldn't be in such a state. As she spoke, she began to cry. This morning, Jessica's family's 3 companies, 12 storefronts, as well as all the properties, shares, and savings under their names have been frozen. Over 20 soldiers surrounded their villa and placed them under house arrest. Hearing the woman's complaints, Jessica's father felt even more vexed. He said impatiently, "How can a television program be real? This Loretta is just doing things for money. It's just someone from the army trying to create hype." That also shows the direction of the situation. Jessica's younger brother said anxiously, "Father, why don't you break off all ties with that stupid woman immediately? Damn it. If it wasn't because that stupid woman got involved in the 13 armies conflict, how could we be implicated?" Under the Grey Army's propaganda, most of the humans were naturally on their side. Over 10 countries' armies had already gathered at the foot of the Kunlun Mountains, and over 200 extraordinary warriors had also rushed to the Kunlun Mountains one after another. A tremendous pressure gathered in the sky above the Kunlun Mountains. The gazes of everyone in the world were gathered here, waiting for Fang Xinjiang to make his decision. However, other than the White Army itself, probably no one in the entire world thought highly of them. Just then, a news report was suddenly broadcasted on the television, attracting the attention of Jessica's family. This is the breaking news report. According to the latest news from the front lines, the White Army's new commander, Fang Xinjiang, has given his response to the joint trial. He says, saying this, the news host seemed to be stunned for a moment. She blinked as if she did not dare to believe what she had just read. A short while later, she gulped and continued. Fang Xinjiang says that within 3 hours, the 9 armies must all merge into the White Army. Otherwise, he'll bathe the heaven-connecting tower in blood and kill all those who resist. When everyone heard this news, they felt as if a bomb had exploded in their heads. They felt that Fang Xinjiang had gone crazy. This lunatic, does he want to plunge the entire planet into war? Jessica's father slumped on the sofa. His eyes were lifeless, and his mind was blank. In the heaven-connecting tower, the king of trepidation laughed out loud. "You got guts. You've really got guts. Which one of you would have expected this guy to respond like this?" His eyes were filled with great excitement. Once an all-out war broke out, the Yellow Army's chance would come. The conflicts between the 13 armies have been going on for a long time. Even though it was 9 against 1 right now, once they really started fighting, all sorts of conflicts would definitely erupt. If a few of their mortal enemies were to sneak up on them, it might develop into a chaotic battle. At the thought of this, the King of Trepidation's body trembled with excitement. On the other hand, Hui's countenance darkened abruptly, and he was burning with fury. Arrogant. He's too arrogant. Who does he think he is? It could be said that Fang Xingjian's reply had caused Hui to completely miscalculate this time around. He had only wanted to join forces with the majority of the armies to attack a small group of people, relying on the 9 armies' influence to force Fang Xingjian to submit. In his plans, there was no such thing as a war breaking out. After all, once a war broke out, it would be a state of chaos. After all, there were 9 leaders in the 9 armies, and it would be a big problem as to who would listen to whom. The entire situation was in danger of going out of control. This was something the Grey Army, which had always wanted to control the world and hoped that society would operate according to their rules, would never allow. The 7 commanders sat together at a huge circular conference table. Unlike Hui's fury and the King of Trepidation's excitement, a Caucasian lady wearing a purple qipao appeared very relaxed. The light purple qipao wrapped around her body, bringing out her voluptuous figure. The 2 supple mounds before her chest were almost about to pop out, making one wonder if the qipao's quality was good enough. The slit below her waist revealed her pair of long and slender legs. A layer of exquisite black stockings wrapped around her legs, appearing extremely sexy. This lady who was filled with allure was the Purple Army's commander, Ziling. She smiled and said, "I feel that this Fang Xingjian is quite manly. Don't you guys think so?" Hui's countenance darkened further. However, although he had miscalculated with regards to Fang Xingjian, Hui felt that they still held an absolute advantage, and the situation had not changed in any way. Therefore, he said solemnly, "This isn't the time to joke around. That Fang Xingjian has killed people from my army and violated the 1-3 agreement. Since he can kill my people, he can also kill yours. Moreover, you guys have also seen his strength. Which one of you would dare to say that you'll definitely win against him in a one-on-one fight? This means that he even has the chance to kill existences at the level of commander." Hearing Hui's words, everyone's hearts skipped a beat. They thought of the powerful strength that Fang Xingjian had displayed during the live broadcast. Hui continued, "Earth may seem peaceful right now, but we all know that there are endless dangers hidden behind this. That person is constantly eyeing this planet, and our powers mustn't be wasted on internal strife. However, after Fang Xingjian has started this, if we don't punish him severely and stop him immediately, the consequences will be unimaginable. It might even lead to the end of the world. Everyone here won't have it easy either." A bald old monk in orange monk robes put his palms together and said with a sigh, "Amitba, it's true that these are troubled times. If we don't suppress Fang Xingjian, this person will probably stir up the world and bring calamity to the mortal world. However, his strength is extremely astonishing. We'll need to join forces if we wish to punish him." Hui emphasized. Based on the Gold Army's calculations, the power that he instantly unleashed when he exchanged blows with Grade and me is 3 times the power that I can unleash at the highest level. Let's say that this isn't his full power. A young man with blood-red hair that looked like burning flames smiled coldly and said, "This isn't his full power?" He shook his head in disbelief. "He's not a god. He's just a human. How is it possible?" This was clearly the Red Army's commander. "Underestimate the enemy," Hui said as he looked at the young man. "This is a battle that concerns the world's safety. Shouldn't we be cautious and estimate the other party's strength based on the worst-case scenario? Once we fail in this encirclement, you can imagine what the situation on Earth will be like." The King of Trepidation thought, due to the requirements of their temperaments, the 13 armies can't see eye to eye with each other. There's no unity at all. If it wasn't because of that person's external threat, they'd probably have started fighting a long time ago. Once the encirclement fails, they'll probably do things their own way for the sake of self-preservation, and everything will be in chaos. This is suitable for our yellow army to spread terror and increase our strength tremendously. We might even surpass all the other commanders. A middle-aged man wearing a blue uniform frowned and looked at the empty seats at the conference table. He said, "We're great in Kaosi. Why aren't they here yet? Let's ignore them for now." He continued to talk about his arrangements. "For now, let's assume that Fong Xingjian's strength is over 5 times that of mine. If we wish to defeat him, we mustn't fight him one-on-one. We must use our abilities to coordinate with each other. It's best not to let him unleash his battle prowess. Otherwise, even if we win, Earth's environment will be severely damaged." As Hui said this, he gradually regained his confidence. "We won't give him a chance to engage in an all-out battle, nor will we give him a chance to fight head-on. We'll make use of the few of our abilities to coordinate and kill Fong Xingjian directly. As for the remaining warriors from the White Army, there's no need to fear them." Everyone nodded. Even if Fong Xingjian really possessed 5 times the strength of Hui, they would be able to kill him completely with their abilities working together. Hui looked at everyone solemnly and said, "Everyone should understand the severity of the problem now. If we can unite and coordinate with each other, then there's no need to worry about Fong Xingjian. However, if one of us harbors disloyalty and causes this battle to fail, then the entire Earth might welcome chaos, and he'll become the center of all humanity." As he said this, his gaze turned toward the king of trepidation and the red-haired young man, causing the two of them to feel uneasy. The middle-aged man wearing a blue uniform suddenly stood up and said, "Enemy attack." At the next moment, a white light pillar descended from the sky. Under everyone's astonished gazes, it encompassed the area within a range of 10 lis. In the blink of an eye, the entire heaven-connecting pagoda was completely vaporized. Chapter 9:33. The light pillar that descended from the sky instantly vaporized everything within a range of 10 lis. When the white light gradually disappeared, only a stretch of scorched land was left behind. On the flat land, there were no longer any physical existences beyond the horizon. The entire land was like a piece of black cloth that had been ironed. As for the Grey Army's headquarters, the world's tallest heaven-connecting tower, not a single strand of hair was left behind. Concurrently, Jessica stood in void space with the Panway sword in her hand. She wore a solemn expression as she bellowed coldly, "Let me remind everyone that you still have 2 hours to decide if you want to surrender or not." Everything within a range of 10 lis had been vaporized. However, the 7 commanders had used all sorts of means to survive. Red, blue, orange, and other colors of light encompassed their bodies, allowing them to float in midair. Looking at the scorched land before him and hearing Jessica's threats, he was infuriated. His mind was filled with fury. "B*TSH, you're courting death." With an explosive bellow, he slapped out with his palm, and gray energy turned into a stretch of huge mountain that pressed down fiercely toward Jessica. The huge mountain that was formed in the blink of an eye expanded rapidly under the gray energy. Very soon, it covered up the sky and turned into a huge shadow. One could faintly see that the layers of mountain ranges seemed to be the shadows of the Kunlun Mountains, Alps, Heavenly Mountains, Kilimanjaro, and other mountain ranges on Earth. It was as if all the mountain ranges on the entire planet were connected together and came crashing down explosively. With a single attack, strong gales seethed, and magnetic forces interacted with the ground under Hui's feet, unleashing a world-shaking prowess. Hui had been so infuriated that he had performed his ultimate move right from the start. In terms of the prowess of this move, although it was not comparable to the Domination Fist and Zero Seal that he had performed in the past, its range of attack and prowess far surpassed that of the Domination Fist and Zero Seal. It gave off a shocking feeling as if there was nowhere to hide in the world. If he were to encounter an ordinary opponent, they would probably be overwhelmed by this aura and crushed into dust before they could react. They would not be able to unleash even 30% of their battle prowess. Although Hui was enraged, he still maintained a hint of calmness and used this move against a rookie like Jessica. However, faced with the descending mountain shadow that blotted out the sky, Jessica remained calm. She slashed out toward the sky with the Panway sword, and a stream of sword chi that was about 1,000 meters wide soared into the sky. It slashed out fiercely toward the mountain shadow in the sky like a reverse galactic river. Rumbling sounds rang out as the sword chi collided with the shadow of the mountain. In an instant, soil and stone fragments flew everywhere. Countless mountains were torn apart and shattered, and debris fell down. With just one strike, the huge mountain in the sky was split into two. The sword chi continued forward, disappearing into the horizon. The mountain shadow that was split into two seemed to be able to hold on for a few seconds before it gradually collapsed, turning into countless fragments that fell to the ground. It was like a myriad of meteors hitting the ground, causing the earth to tremble and sand to fly up. The terrain changed greatly, leaving behind a large undulating hill and a large pit. At the sight of this scene, the countenances of all the commanders turned solemn as they stared at the Panway sword in Jessica's hand. Their faces were filled with curiosity, puzzlement, and solemnity. After Jessica slashed out with her sword, she did not stop. She turned into a stream of sword light and flew out, disappearing from everyone's vision in the blink of an eye. Hui's eyes narrowed, and the fury on his face disappeared completely. Instead, his eyes were filled with coldness, revealing endless calmness. You guys sensed it, right? A hint of scorching light flashed in the red-haired young man's eyes. Didn't you notice it back at the hall? This red-haired young man was the Red Army's leader, Akaryu Jushru. Hui shook his head and said, I originally thought that the sword was formed from Fang Xingjian's powers, just like how we use our rings to transmit our powers across a distance of 1,000 lis. But by the looks of it now, earlier at the hall, he had clearly not sensed any connection between Jessica and the longsword. All the powers had been unleashed by the longsword itself. However, during the few exchanges earlier, he had clearly sensed that the white energy in Jessica's body kept on stimulating the longsword, unleashing astonishing sword chis. By the looks of it, the longsword was not formed from Fang Xingjian's powers. Instead, it was clearly some kind of powerful weapon. The old monk dressed in orange monk robes said slowly, This Jessica is merely a small soldier who has just joined the White Army for a few days. Yet, she's able to use the ring's energy to stimulate the longsword sword chis and unleash such a prowess. Does anyone know of the origins of this sword? This old monk was the Orange Army's commander, Monk Hui Fa. He had been a monk to begin with. It was because the orange ring required the user to have the resolve to sacrifice themselves for the sake of others. It had too high a demand on the user's character. His influence and strength had always been on par with the White Army's. However, he was a true eminent monk and could unleash the orange ring's powers very well. Hearing Hui Fa's question, Ziling chuckled and said, A few days ago, the White Army, Silver Army, and our Purple Army each had a ring go missing. It was a resonance of emotions, and they automatically chose their owners. This Fang Xingjian has never been mentioned before. It's as if he had popped out from a rock. Moreover, this divine sword also appeared suddenly, and there's no way to tell where it came from. Come to think of it, what Fang Xingjian displayed wasn't the ring's energy either, right? A man who wore a pair of frameless glasses and a suit, looking like a successful person, pushed up his glasses and said, You're saying that this Fang Xingjian is the person whom the ring automatically acknowledged as its owner? Since he suddenly appeared, it's possible that he's not a native of this planet, and that he was the one who brought this weapon? This man, who was dressed like a successful person, appeared to be the most normal person amongst the 7 people present. However, he was actually the Green Army's leader, the Ming King. Who cares? Akaryu Jushru, whose red hair was fluttering in the wind, said fiercely, "Let's snatch that sword first. This sword's prowess is extraordinary. If we use it, it'll be like adding wings to a tiger. If you guys don't want it, then I'll take it first." With that, he squatted down slightly. Even though he was stepping on void space, it was as if he had really stepped on something. A soft bang rang out under his feet, and as air currents rose up under his feet, he darted out abruptly, disappearing almost in the blink of an eye. This was the Red Ring's unique ability, Unbounded Leap. The Red Army's mental state was one of supremacy. They disregarded all external rules, etiquette, and even objective reality. Everything was based on what they thought in their hearts, and they only wished for a single thought to be clear. This sort of requirement could be said to be the easiest to get started with. However, it was also easy to learn but hard to master. After all, it was very easy to bully the weak and be selfish. However, when faced with existences that were stronger than them, when faced with the movements of the entire world, when faced with their family and friends, as well as the entanglements of gratitude and grudges, they had to be able to cut through the Gordian knot. Not everyone would be able to do this. As long as one's mental state and will were sufficient, the Unbounded Leap would be able to ignore all obstacles between the user and the target. The Red Army's leader, Akaryu Jushru, was the most outstanding among them. Chapter 9:34. With this leap, Akaryu Jushru was clearly chasing after Jessica. The others exchanged a glance and instantly turned into 6 streams of light, giving chase in the direction where Jessica had disappeared. Hui sighed inwardly. He knew that Fang Xingjian had taken the initiative to display such a divine sword, causing a rift to appear between them. However, this was an overt plot, and he was unable to stop it. After all, after seeing this sword's prowess, even Hui felt a burning desire in his heart. If there was a chance, he would definitely want to get his hands on this divine sword. But do you think that you'll be able to increase your chances of winning by stirring up a conflict? Hui smiled coldly inwardly. It's just that you went for wool and came home shorn. On the other side, Akaryu Jushru instantly traversed several thousand kilometers and punched out. His fiery red fist instantly imprinted on Jessica's back. With a rumble, sword light flashed explosively at the critical moment, blocking this punch. However, Jessica was still sent tumbling and crashing into a stretch of desert. Sand and dust splattered everywhere, and a stretch of sand dune was formed. Jessica let out a stifled snort and sensed that a part of the skin on her back had been completely destroyed. Her back was now a bloody mess. Akaryu Jushru had ignored the obstruction between the two of them with the Unbounded Leap. He had even disregarded the protection of the sword light and struck her back. If it was not because the sword light had automatically protected her under her skin after failing to protect her, Jessica would not have just had her skin destroyed. She would have been killed by this punch. It's a divine sword as expected. Akaryu Jushru landed on a sand dune with a bang. He looked coldly at Jessica and said, "Hand over the divine sword, and I'll leave your corpse in one piece." Just as the 7 commanders were chasing after Jessica, Fang Xingjian, who was in the sacred white crevice, seemed to be deep in thought. With a flick of his finger, 2 streams of sword light shot out from his fingertips. They turned into 2 silver long swords and flew toward Priest Longmai and Priest Tai. They were Fang Xingjian's Thunder Calamity sword and Abyss sword. Seeing the 2 swords flying out, both Priest Longmai's and Priest Tai's eyes lit up. They looked at the swords with fascinated expressions. They had long been envious of Jessica's prowess with the Panwei Queen. However, Fang Xingjian instructed, "Jessica is under siege. The 2 of you, take a sword each and go help her." Understood. Fang Xingjian nodded slightly as he watched the 2 of them retreat with their swords. Not long after they left, a beam of sword light slashed out from the void. It was the white bone sword that the immortal child had possessed. The long sword trembled and transformed into the immortal child's appearance. Isn't this plan too risky? Each of your 3 divine swords is famous throughout the ages and possess the power to split the heavens and the earth. If you lose them, it doesn't matter. This sword has already become one with me. Others can forget about taking it away. Feng Xingjian said, Immortal child, it's all thanks to your discovery this time around. Otherwise, if we hadn't sensed anything, we might really have been taken over by that person. This person's strength isn't lower than tier 6 of the divine level, and he also possesses the special powers of this world. He has already merged with space-time, and just the mention of his name will be able to sense it. The immortal child sighed. I didn't expect that there would be such a character in this small world. It was true that the size of Earth was much smaller compared to Miracle World. Feng Xingjian muttered to himself for a moment before saying, However, that person's remarkable abilities are too powerful. Just this level of preparation alone is still not enough. The two of us will join forces to clear the trial. We'll be bound together for good or bad. When the time comes, I'll naturally release the White Emperor Zenith sword, and Brother Feng can use it to kill that person, the immortal child said. Thankfully, this world's cultivation history is still short, and that person doesn't have the sudden inspiration ability. The first attack of the White Emperor Zenith sword will definitely be able to catch him off guard. Feng Xingjian nodded. The history of extraordinary powers in this world was still too short, and the various aspects of their power system were naturally not as complete as Knight's martial arts. Feng Xingjian and the immortal child's real target was that person who was hiding in the dark. To them, regardless of whether it was Hui He or Long Mai, they were merely chess pieces at most. Elsewhere, in the desert, Sword Chi's soared into the sky. Akaryu Jushuru flashed at rapid speed, also using unbounded leap to circle around Jessica and attack to and fro. Each time they came into contact, a large amount of blood would splatter. His unbounded leap could be said to be unstoppable, and one could only receive it head-on with one's physical body. Even with sword light protecting one's body, the outermost layer of one's skin would be wiped off before one could instantly defend against it. Almost in the blink of an eye, Jessica's body was covered in blood. At the sight of this scene, Akaryu Jushuru became even more excited. He licked his blood-red lips and said, Woman, I can't even be considered a warm-up right now. How much longer can you hold on for? Jessica bit her lip and did not say a word. She merely tightened her grip on the Panway sword and slashed out once again. Sword light soared into the sky, slashing out toward Akaryu Jushuru. However, it was pierced through by Akaryu Jushuru's unbounded leap, and blood splattered out once again on Jessica's shoulder. Clearly, with Jessica's experience and cultivation, she was unable to unleash the Panway sword's full prowess. She was even being slightly restrained by Akaryu Jushuru. A short moment later, Hui He and the others also arrived. They stood in the sky, surrounding Jessica from all directions. As they watched Akaryu Jushuru put up a desperate fight against Jessica, their gazes revealed all sorts of scheming thoughts. In their opinion, Jessica was already at the end of her rope, and the fight for the divine sword would follow. Just then, another 2 streams of sword light came attacking down from the sky. They were Priest Longmai and Priest Tai. Ziling chuckled and said, Everyone, let's attack together. At this moment, with Priest Longmai and Priest Tai's reinforcements, the battle instantly entered a white-hot state. However, despite having the help of the divine sword, the 3 experts from the White Army were unable to unleash the divine sword's true prowess. Jessica had also suffered from serious injuries a long time ago and did not have much battle prowess left. On the contrary, the 7 commanders cooperated well and complemented each other with their abilities, causing the 3 of them to be pushed back repeatedly. Over 10 minutes later, Jessica let out an agonizing cry. Akaryu Jushuru snatched away the Panway sword. He looked at the long sword in his hand excitedly, feeling as if his entire body was filled with endless power. Priest Longmai frowned, and the thunder calamity in his hand slashed out toward Akaryu Jushuru. However, the thunder calamity, which could cut through and slash through everything, was blocked by the Panway sword. Just as he was distracted, Hui made a brazen move. The world abides to the heart was activated, instantly restraining Akaryu Jushuru. With Hui's current serious injuries, he could only maintain this restraint for an instant. However, it was already sufficient for the many commanders present. At this instant, the Yellow Army's commander, the King of Trepidation, and the Green Army's commander, Ming Wang, made their moves concurrently. Endless spiritual chi of trepidation burst out, and an identical green thunder calamity sword appeared in Ming Wang's hand. In the sacred white crevice, Fang Xingjian's gaze suddenly lit up, and he said calmly, "It's done. Then I'll set off right away." As he spoke, he stood up slowly. The 12 pages of the Book of Wisdom next to him slowly closed up and were placed into his divine country. The immortal child said, "Brother Fang, don't worry. They still don't know of my existence. When the time comes, I'll provide assistance from the dark and release the White Emperor Zenith sword to assist you at the crucial moment." Fang Xingjian nodded, took a step forward, and disappeared completely. Chapter 9:35. In the desert, the King of Trepidation's attack sent spiritual chi of trepidation gushing out toward Priest Longmai with an overwhelming force. The extremely dense feelings of trepidation gathered together, as if they had formed many material demonic shadows. Trepidation was a living creature's instinct. It hid in the hearts of living creatures, constantly teaching them respect and helping them to avoid natural dangers. Trepidation helped humans avoid danger and survive in the natural world. However, excessive trepidation would cause humans to be unable to move forward and lose the courage to overcome difficulties. Trepidation is a reverence toward the world, an instinct of all living creatures. Under the heavenly law, who can escape from it? The King of Trepidation opened up his hand, and the spiritual chi turned into a huge demonic shadow, wanting to engulf Priest Longmai. Such intense spiritual chi of trepidation could bring out the hint of trepidation in anyone's heart, turning the iron-blooded general into a cowardly person. Once the spiritual chi of trepidation spread out wantonly, it would be enough to scare an entire city of commoners into idiots. At the instant the demonic shadow engulfed Priest Longmai, the green longsword in the hands of the Green Army's commander, the Abyss Lord, also arrived. The Green Army grasped the ability to replicate, and they could replicate anything they had seen before. This naturally included the Thunder Calamity sword in Priest Longmai's hand. However, when the replicated sword pierced out, Ming Wang's countenance changed. He sensed that the energy depletion of this replicated sword had far surpassed his estimation. Even with the energy reserves in his ring, he could only sustain it for over 10 seconds. However, this made him even more determined to get his hands on this sword. The green replicated Thunder Calamity sword pierced out into the air, breaking through the layers of demonic shadows. The King of Trepidation bellowed furiously, "Ming Wang, you're courting death." However, Ming Wang did not care and continued to pierce out with his long sword, turning into streams of cold light that encompassed Priest Longmai. However, Priest Longmai was in a difficult situation. He had been besieged to begin with, and his powers were greatly depleted. Now that Zi Ling and the King of Trepidation had taken the opportunity to attack his heart with secret arts, his mind and will were shaken violently. It became increasingly difficult for him to fend off Ming Wang's attacks. Man Tai wanted to provide assistance, but he was also besieged by Hui He, Zi Ling, and the others. With Jessica's defeat, the remaining Longmai and Mantai were unable to hold on for long. The Thunder Calamity sword and the Abyss sword were taken by Ming Wang and Reverend Fahui, respectively. With that, the Red Army's commander Akaryu Jushru obtained the Panwei sword. The Green Army's commander Ming Wang obtained the Thunder Calamity sword, and the Orange Army's commander Reverend Fahui obtained the Abyss sword. As for Hui He, Zi Ling, the King of Trepidation, and the others, they had gained nothing. After snatching the 3 divine swords, Jessica and the rest were about to risk their lives to snatch the swords back when they heard Fang Xingjian's voice. After a moment of hesitation, they immediately flew into the sky. Throughout the entire process, no one stopped them. It was because the seven-colored army's commanders had already focused their attention on the three divine swords. Ever since Akaryu Jushiru snatched away the Panway sword, he had been standing in void space, holding onto the sword with both hands. His will seemed to be communicating with the Panway sword incessantly. Streams of fiery red ring energy kept on wrapping out toward the longsword, seeming to be communicating with the energy in the sword. The power contained in the Panway sword far surpassed his previous estimation. When he entered it with his will, it was as if he had entered a world of swords. All sorts of sword light flashed to and fro within it, and he could sense endless profoundness and knowledge hidden within. That woman is too weak and unable to unleash the true prowess of this divine sword. Now that this sword is in my hands, it's like adding wings to a tiger. Akaryu Jushiru was overjoyed and thought, with the help of this sword, I might be able to reach the heavens in a single bound and truly reach the pinnacle. Or even surpass that person. Seeing that the battle had ended and the three people from the White Army had fled, a hint of disdain flashed in Akaryu Jushiru's heart. Then he saw the gazes of Hui He and the others looking over. He held the Panway sword and swung it in the air. A myriad of sword light shot out explosively, plowing through the desert within a range of 1,000 meters and instantly vaporizing several million tons of sand. A lofty feeling of being unstoppable and no one in the world could contend against this rose in Akaryu Jushiru's heart. Coupled with the fact that he was from the Red Army to begin with and that he was the only one in the world, this feeling suited his character even more. Even the ring's energy surged a little. It's really a good divine equipment. Seeing the grim and astonished expressions of Hui He and the others, Akaryu Jushiru felt even more delighted. He said coldly, "The White Army has been defeated and the Dragon Vein has fled. Aren't you guys going to give chase?" Hearing Akaryu Jushiru's words, the middle-aged man in blue uniform stepped forward. He was the Blue Army's leader, Bruce. Looking at Akaryu Jushiru and the divine swords in his hands, Bruce said directly, "Everyone, these three divine swords have a mysterious background and possess great prowess. That Feng Xingjian might even be a visitor from beyond the heavens. These three swords mustn't be used lightly. We should seal them up and study them in detail. We'll only consider whether we should use them after making sure that there's no harm done to them." That's right. The King of Trepidation glared at the Green Army's Ming Wang and the Thunder Calamity sword in his hand. He said coldly, "This weapon is strange. It's better to keep it first. Otherwise, you might fall into Feng Xingjian's trap." Despite saying this, Akaryu Jushiru, who had obtained the sword, could sense the great power and knowledge contained within it. Therefore, how could he be willing to let it go so easily? Ming Wang smiled and said, "I've already checked this sword. It hasn't been tampered with. I can already control the power within it like it's my own arm, and there's nothing abnormal about it." Akaryu Jushiru did not stand on ceremony when he spoke. "I was the one who snatched this sword. If any of you want it, you can come and snatch it yourself." As he spoke, he darted out and disappeared. He had activated the unbounded leap and left directly. Clearly, after obtaining this Panway sword, he was not willing to get involved in any more battles. Instead, he wanted to find a quiet place to comprehend the profoundness within the sword by himself, so that he could attain another breakthrough. As Akaryu Jushiru leaped away, Ming Wang chuckled. It was unknown when his body had started to slowly dissipate, but he had only left behind a clone. His real body had long since retreated. At the sight of this scene, the atmosphere instantly turned cold. A dangerous gleam flashed in the King of Trepidation's eyes. Clearly, he was furious that he had not managed to get his hands on a single divine sword. Amiba! Just then, Reverend Faoe, who was dressed in orange monk robes, stepped forward and said, "If everyone is willing, you can study this divine sword together with me. Although this sword contains great power, its origins are mysterious. It also has an unclear relationship with that Feng Xingjian. We mustn't ignore it." Chapter 9:36 The Orange Army required the members to have a heart of dedication and sacrifice. Therefore, Fa Hui could be said to be the most selfless person present. Hui He and the others immediately agreed with this suggestion. Fa Hui tossed the abyss sword into midair. In that instant, the 5 experts immediately split out a portion of their powers and gushed out toward the longsword. With this, the ring's energy and the powers in the divine sword interacted, and the 5 people present immediately sensed the powerful powers. Complicated expressions appeared in the eyes of Hui He and the king of trepidation. This power must be in my hands. The same thought rose in the 2 of their minds. Just then, a stream of sword light tore through void space and arrived at the scene. It was a man with fluttering black hair and a long white robe casually draped over his body, faintly revealing his lean body. However, the most eye-catching thing was the man's pair of eyes that were like black gemstones. They were like black holes in the universe, constantly emitting a fatal attraction force, as if they wanted to suck one's soul into them. Almost at the instant Fang Xingjian appeared, he caught everyone's attention. Even the few commanders, who had high cultivations, were stunned for a moment before they managed to break free from this attraction force. Hints of surprise flashed in Ziling's eyes. Who are you? What power was that earlier? This feeling of being attracted and being noticed was too similar to the Purple Army's lovability. However, Fang Xingjian smiled, looked at the 5 commanders, and said, "The 5 of you snatched my sword, but you still don't know who I am?" The king of trepidation's countenance changed. "You're Fang Xingjian?" The other 4 also fiercely raised the energy in their rings, and the 5 of them all had their auras explode like 5 small suns flying in the air. Hui said directly, "Reverend Fa Hui, I'll have to trouble you to take control of this divine sword first. This way, you'll be able to unleash your full power when the battle breaks out later on." Hearing that, the others' expressions changed slightly, but they did not object. They knew that Hui was right. Out of the 5 people present, the others would probably not be at ease if they took control of the divine sword. They might even plot against the sword wielder during the battle. Only the Orange Legion used sacrifice and dedication as a condition to be selected. Reverend Fa Hui's temperament was also the greatest guarantee that he would not covet the divine sword. Fa Hui nodded and took back the abyss sword without hesitation. Hui said, "Fang Xingjian, you indiscriminately killed members of the army, endangered Earth's safety, and attempted to start a world war. However, you're the White Army's commander after all, an expert. It's not too late for you to admit your guilt and repent now." Of course, he did not really want to reconcile with Fang Xingjian. It was just that the divine sword's powers and origins were too mysterious, and the divine sword came from the White Army. Therefore, before he could get a clear understanding of the divine sword's background, he still wanted to drag things out. It would be best if he could only take action after they had completely grasped the divine sword's profoundness and gotten a clear understanding of Fang Xingjian's background. A strange gleam flashed in the king of trepidation's eyes as he said, "That's right. Fang Xingjian, armies are like brothers. Although you've gone a little overboard, it's not impossible to salvage the situation. As long as you're willing to lower your head and admit your mistakes, we might be able to forgive you and even return this sword to you. During the period where you admit your guilt and repent, this sword is too dangerous. It's better for us to take care of it for you." The others did not object. They merely looked at Fang Xingjian with scrutinizing gazes, as if waiting for his reply. After all, there were 5 commanders present, and each of them had amazing abilities. Although they were wary of Fang Xingjian, they would not really be afraid of him. However, Fang Xingjian clearly would not wait for them. A hint of a brutal smile broke out on his face as he said calmly, "Are you done?" "You." Hui still wanted to say something. Rumble. As Fang Xingjian's figure moved slightly, it was as if the clouds in the sky had split apart. The atmosphere within a range of 1,000 li seethed, and a heavy pressure came gushing forth. It almost caused everyone present to feel suffocated, and they wore astonished expressions. At the next moment, Feng Xingjian tapped out with a finger, and an invisible power seemed to shrink into a single point in that instant, pressing down on Hui's body. It was as if a finger was crushing an ant to death. With this tap from Feng Xingjian, Hui's body instantly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood fog. As an agonizing cry rang out, Hui, who had lost his physical body, turned into a lump of pure, gray energy, forming a blurry image of himself. Right now, his physical body had been destroyed, and he would only be able to use the gray energy to carry his will in the future. Although he did not die from this, the destruction of his physical body caused him to lose all the happiness that his physical body could obtain in the future. Moreover, he had used his physical body for several decades and entrusted many of his feelings to it. This caused him to be extremely infuriated. However, at the next moment, Feng Xingjian's actions were like a basin of cold water, completely extinguishing his fury. It was because Feng Xingjian tapped out a second time. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The atmosphere tore apart, and explosions rang out in the sky. As the air was compressed by a force, an invisible vacuum seemed to reveal the appearance of a finger, tapping out toward the King of Trepidation's head. Roar! Seeing this finger tap out, the King of Trepidation let out an explosive bellow, and a myriad of demonic shadows rose up behind him, colliding toward the finger. Simultaneously, Ziling, Bruce, and Fahue also made a move simultaneously. 3 streams of purple, blue, and orange light burst out. Together with the Abyss long sword, they smashed out toward the finger force that descended from the sky. However, when the 2 gushes of powers collided, the trio's combined forces were instantly torn into dust. The King of Trepidation's myriad of demonic shadows also turned into nothingness amidst a series of agonizing cries. The finger force did not stop at all. It pressed down on the King of Trepidation's body, causing his body to explode into a lump of flesh and blood. Then it continued pressing down into the desert and stirring up endless sand. How is this possible? At the sight of this scene, there was no longer any fury in Hui's mind. He watched as the King of Trepidation was pressed down onto the ground like he was crushing a mosquito. Even though Hui no longer had a physical body, he still broke out in cold sweat. Run quickly. This person's powers far surpass our imagination. We'll need to gather all the army's powers to defeat him. Everyone, split up and escape. At the next moment, 5 streams of light cut across the sky, flying out in 5 different directions. At the sight of this scene, Feng Xingjian smiled. Taking a step forward, he disappeared once again, in the sky above a certain well-known peninsula in the Mediterranean Sea. Countless tourists were partying on the beach. Beauties in bikinis were either applying sunscreen or basking in the sun, reading magazines or playing volleyball. They kept on displaying their youthful vigor and alluring postures. Just then, a stream of blue light pierced through the sky and collided into the beach with a rumble. It cut out a ravine that was several hundred meters long and sent sand and dust splattering all over the place. Countless people looked at this scene with their eyes and mouths agape. Some people screamed and ran away, while others mustered up their courage and looked toward the place where the blue light had landed. They saw that the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, was being grabbed by the head by a black-haired and black-eyed man. Chapter 9:37. In the television broadcasting studio, a huge number was counting down with each passing second, affecting the nerves of countless people across the globe. This was the 3-hour countdown that the television station had set up after Feng Xingjian had given his reply. Over an hour ago, an unknown explosion had occurred in the northernmost continent. The entire heaven-connecting tower had turned into nothingness, and the land within a range of 100 lis had been scorched. Over half an hour ago, a battle had taken place in the desert of Central Asia, and it was suspected that there were commanders fighting. Reports regarding these 2 pieces of news filled up the entire world, attracting the attention of countless people. It was a pity that no one from the military or the armies were able to provide any more information. The media could only keep on trying to investigate the entire matter through their own channels. The host in the broadcasting studio said, "Right now, there's only half an hour left to the time limit that Fong Xingjian mentioned. However, there's still no new information from the armies. However, what we can be sure of is that the White Army has already started fighting with the other 9 armies. However, other than a few explosions, there's no other news. It's so quiet that it's a little strange." He then turned to look at Professor Lorton and asked, "Professor, what do you think of the current situation? The White Army is a part of the 13 armies after all. As the commander, it's impossible for Fong Xingjian to be killed so easily," Professor Lorton said with certainty. Professor Lorton said with certainty, "The explosion at the beginning must have been caused by Fong Xingjian attacking the heaven-connecting pagoda first. However, he was then pursued by the 9 commanders. The reason why there's no news is that Fong Xingjian has gone into hiding, and the 9 commanders are pursuing him. Since there's no battle, there's naturally no news." The host nodded, but at the next moment, his countenance changed. He pressed down on the earpiece next to his ear, as if he was listening to something. He lifted his head abruptly, pointed at the camera, and said, "Everyone, our frontline reporters have received the latest information. They've discovered traces of Fong Xingjian on the Mediterranean Sea's Golden Beach. It seems that he's fighting with the other commanders." Professor Lorton said agitatedly, "He must have been captured by the other commanders. To think that even ordinary people have discovered his tracks. The battle must have been decided." The host nodded and said, "The reporters in front are rushing there. Let's take a look at the photos posted by the local passers-by on the internet. These are pictures taken by witnesses." As he spoke, a picture appeared on the big screen. It was a picture of Fong Xingjian standing on the beach, holding Bruce's head in one hand and lifting him into the air. Everyone gasped when they saw the photo in front of them. "That's Bruce, the Blue Army's commander. I can't believe he's being carried like this. Who is that man? Is it Fong Xingjian?" The host was also surprised and said in disbelief, "Based on the news from the scene, the man who was lifted up is the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, and the black-haired man is the White Army's commander, Fong Xingjian." According to the witnesses, Fong Xingjian left after beating Bruce up and destroying his body. As Fong Xingjian spoke, the pictures kept on jumping, and a series of pictures were displayed one after another. The content of the pictures was the scene of Fong Xingjian smashing Bruce's body with a punch and a kick. Even though such an explosive scene had been censored, it still instantly caused a great commotion. On the internet, countless uncensored versions of the photos were being broadcasted crazily. The host looked at Professor Lorton and said, "Professor, what do you think of the current situation? Did Fong Xingjian kill Bruce? Where are the other commanders? What on earth has happened?" Lorton looked at the pictures on the big screen in a daze. His tone was filled with confusion. I also." However, the host did not wait for him to finish his words. He pressed down on his earphones and stood up agitatedly once again. "What? Everyone, the latest news is that Fong Xingjian has appeared in Eastern Europe again. Let's take a look at the footage from the scene." In the blink of an eye, the image changed and turned into a blurry shot. It seemed to have been taken by a mobile phone and was slightly shaky. There were also all sorts of exclamations and screams coming from the image. In the image, it could be clearly seen that 2 figures were constantly colliding and chasing each other in the sky. From time to time, they would land on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Countless buildings collapsed and explosions rose up. Looking at the scene before them, everyone in the live-streaming room wore solemn and respectful expressions. When they saw this kind of power that humans could not resist at all, there was a hint of fear in their eyes. Looking at the crowd that kept screaming and running away in the image, they felt a sense of sympathy for the death of a rabbit. At the next moment, 2 streams of light and shadows rushed in the direction of the cameraman. Amidst the screams, the entire image shook violently. It was as if the cameraman was jumping around continuously. It was only when a loud sound rang out that the image gradually stabilized. Under the cameraman's control, the camera slowly moved toward a stretch of ruins. It was a ruin with only bricks and tiles all over the ground. The entire house seemed to have been buried. Just then, a loud sound rang out, and countless rubble were pushed away. A monk wearing orange robes walked out from the ruins. He was holding onto the abyss sword, looking up into the sky with a calm gaze. In the sky, Feng Xingjian's long black hair was blown up by the strong gales, dancing to and fro in midair like black flames. At the next moment, with a flash, Feng Xingjian clashed with Feng Xingjian, who was in midair. The two figures kept rising up, and in the end, they could only see a huge ball of orange light encompassing the entire sky. Strong gales gushed forth, and the image stopped there. Most of the commoners did not know what this represented. Almost everyone was at a loss as to what to do as they watched this scene. However, this was only the beginning. More and more images started spreading crazily on the internet. Across the entire Earth, more and more people witnessed the battle between Feng Xingjian and others. In East Asia, Central Asia, Europe, Africa, and America, many commanders had their physical bodies shattered by Feng Xingjian. Their bodies, which had been reassembled by the ring's energies, were like the grim reaper chasing after these commanders, dealing them with serious injuries time and time again. The host in the live streaming room was already numb from watching this. Professor Loretta, who was at the side, was also wearing an astonished expression. Feng Xingjian, he's actually chasing after the commanders and attacking them? To think that so many commanders are no match for him despite joining forces? How could something like this happen? Then what should we do? Chapter 9:38. In Jessica's home in North America. Jessica's father was watching the TV with a nervous look on his face. From time to time, he would search the internet for the latest news about the army commanders. It was a pity that ever since the explosion in the extreme north and the battle in the desert, there had been no more news. Jessica's younger brother continued, It's over, it's over. With the 9 commanders ganging up on him, this Feng Xingjian is dead for sure. However, we're going to be implicated as well. What's going on? The countenance of Jessica's father became even more grim. He had not expected that the army's reaction would be so intense this time around. Even the 9 commanders were pressuring Feng Xingjian. Moreover, he had not expected that Feng Xingjian would be so unyielding as well, daring to take the initiative to attack. Just then, the sound of footsteps rang out. The family of 3 turned and saw that Jessica had unknowingly appeared in the room. She had rushed over to rescue her parents. After all, although she did not know what Feng Xingjian's goal was, she knew that there would probably be a series of battles. Therefore, she was afraid that her parents would be implicated, which was why she had come over to bring them away. Jessica's father exclaimed, Jessica! Jessica's younger brother and mother also looked over, but her younger brother said furiously, You still have the cheek to come over? Do you know that you've gotten us into trouble? Dad's decades of hard work has been ruined by you in just a few days. Right now, all of our family's assets are going to be confiscated. Jessica frowned and ignored her younger brother. She looked at her father and said, Dad, pack up and come with me now. Her father hesitated for a moment, not saying a word. Jessica's younger brother objected, We can't leave. Us leaving with you now? Are you asking us to send ourselves to our deaths? Feng Xingjian is being hunted down, and the White Army won't be able to hold on for much longer either. Yet you still want us to follow you? Jessica threw a cold glance at her younger brother, not saying a word. She looked at her father and said, Dad, I don't have much time. Leave with me quickly. As for Lord Feng Xingjian, it's impossible for him to lose to anyone else. Jessica's father still didn't answer. He just frowned and sighed. Jessica, I really can't take this risk. He didn't have high hopes for Feng Xingjian at all. As for what his daughter said, he felt that it was a form of blind worship. Looking at her father, a hint of disappointment flashed in Jessica's eyes. However, the white energy in her body became even denser, and a feeling of apathy and a stronger desire to pursue the path appeared in her heart. At this moment, The host's exclamation came from the television. Then, there was a series of images and reports of Fang Xingjian hunting down the commanders all over the world. Jessica's parents and younger brother were all dumbfounded. Jessica's father sat down on the sofa and suddenly stood up. He looked at Jessica's original seat, but it was already empty. Only Jessica's faint voice could be heard. The other legions are intimidated by Lord Fang Xingjian's reputation, so they probably won't make things difficult for you. However, I'm afraid that there will be a series of battles coming up. You guys should hide well. At this moment, a strong desire to pursue the path of Tao suddenly rose in Jessica. She felt that worldly emotions were so weak and meaningless, and the white energy in her body became increasingly denser. Looking at the disappearing Jessica, Jessica's father opened his mouth wide, and his eyes revealed great regret. I was wrong. I've really made the wrong choice this time around. However, at the next moment, his expression turned resolute. But Jessica is my daughter after all. I'll head to the Kunlun Mountain right now. Even if I have to squeeze, I'll squeeze into the sacred white crevice. Great! A young man glared at the Black Army's commander, grayed, and let out a venomous cry. However, at the next moment, his head was completely engulfed by black energy, and he disappeared. Grade sensed waves of pink ring energy seething to and fro in his body, and he revealed a hint of satisfaction. However, this hint of satisfaction disappeared completely very soon, and the greed in his eyes grew even stronger. Earlier, he had completely engulfed the Pink Army's commander. The reason why the two of them had not reached the heaven-connecting pagoda was because Grade had launched a sneak attack on them on the way. After eliminating the engulfing ghost and gaining complete control over all of the Black Ring's energy, Grade's strength was increasing at a rapid rate with every passing moment. After engulfing the Pink Army's commander, his strength increased explosively once again. Grade raised his hand and looked at the pink ring on his index finger, revealing a hint of surprise. It's still not enough. He licked his lips and looked toward the sky. I need more. I want all of the powers of the other 12 armies. As long as I can gather all of the ring's energies from the remaining armies, I'll be able to merge good and evil, gather the powers of the 13 demonic gods, and become a unique existence in the world. At that time, even that person won't be a match for a single attack from me. The entire world will be in my hands. At the thought of this, the greed in Grade's heart grew even more exuberant. He was like a wolf that had been starving for 3 days, unable to wait to engulf all of the commanders. 3 hours later, the news of Fang Xingjian hunting down the commanders spread throughout the entire world in the blink of an eye. When Grade heard this news, his eyes lit up. The heavens are on my side. The heavens are really on my side. Their flesh is being crushed, and the ring's energies are being depleted incessantly. This is a good opportunity for me to display my abilities. It's really a heaven-sent opportunity. At the thought of this, Grade turned into a burst of black light and searched for the commander's locations. Over 10 minutes later, Grade soon found the location of a target by relying on the special communication method between the armies. In a stretch of forest in South America, Ziling looked at Grade with an expression of great fear and trepidation on her face. It's too terrifying. This Fang Xingjian is really too terrifying. You won't be able to imagine how amazing he is. Moreover, he isn't using the powers of the White Ring. He's definitely a visitor from beyond the heavens and not someone from our world. Right now, Ziling's physical body had also exploded. She was formed from the purple ring's energy, but she was also floating and seemed like she would break down at any moment. Looking at Ziling, Grade slowly moved closer to her and revealed a concerned expression. He said, "It's all right. When the time comes, we'll join forces and call Edward along. Then we'll have 10 commanders working together. Will we still have to be afraid that we won't be able to defeat him?" Ziling's body trembled, but at the next moment, she shook her head. "It's not enough, not enough. We must get that person to come out. Other than him, there's probably no one else on Earth who's a match for Fang Xingjian. You don't understand at all. You haven't really fought against him before. It's only after fighting against him that you'll understand that he's not something that humans can deal with. Hints of terror were planted in her heart by Feng Xingjian. Right now, they kept on sprouting, causing her to be in a daze. Regardless of whether it was her battle prowess, battle will, or wariness, all of them had dropped to the lowest point. It was at this extremely rare moment that Zi Ling's countenance changed, and she bellowed furiously, "What are you doing?" Purple light burst out, but countless streams of black energy came gushing forth, as if wanting to encompass and corrupt her completely. "You idiot! Our real enemy is Feng Xingjian. He's the greatest enemy that all of us face." Grade smiled. "Don't worry. After I eat you guys up, I'll eat him up as well." "Idiot, you'll regret this." Although Zi Ling had put up a resistance, she had been defeated by Feng Xingjian multiple times, and feelings of terror had been planted in her heart. Her ring's energy and will had both deteriorated severely. Right now, she was unable to break free from Grade's attacks, and could only watch as her body was gradually covered up by darkness. Unknowingly, another purple ring had appeared on Grade's hand. Chapter 9:39. Right now, other than the black ring, Grade also had pink and purple rings on him. He had obtained the powers of 3 armies, and his abilities could be said to have increased tremendously once again. However, this was far from being able to satisfy his appetite. With a flash of black light, he once again flew up into the sky, heading in the direction of another commander. In a huge group of temples in the south of Central Asia, orange light soared into the sky like a heavenly pillar connecting the sky and the earth. This temple was the Orange Army's headquarters, the Holy Light Temple. The heavenly pillar in the temple stood tall in the world for 24 hours a day, emitting majestic orange energy and illuminating the land within a range of 100 lis. Every year, there would be Orange Army's warriors coming out from the heavenly pillar after reviving. Right now, a human figure was slowly taking form in the light pillar. His flesh, bones, nerves, and other body tissues were reconstructed one after another, eventually forming Reverend Fahue's appearance. Earlier on, he had activated his powers and the Abyss Sword's powers to carry out a suicidal attack. However, right now, he came back to life unscathed. Even the Abyss Sword in his hand was unscathed and was still being held in his hand. This was the Orange Army's ability, sacrifice. As long as one sacrificed themselves for others and did not have any selfish or utilitarian thoughts in their minds, they would be able to perform such an attack. They would self-detonate all of their bodies and will, completely dedicating their powers to kill the enemy. Then they would revive amidst the eternal orange light. However, the prerequisite was that they did not have any selfish thoughts and were fully devoted to dedicating and sacrificing themselves. This was clearly very difficult to achieve, and even Reverend Fahue did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to do this every single time. Therefore, he would not use this move easily. However, Reverend Fahue, who had just stepped out from the heavenly pillar and completed his rebirth, did not show any hint of joy on his face. Instead, he looked even more miserable. "Master, what on earth happened?" A young monk surrounded by orange light flew into the sky and asked Reverend Fahue. Reverend Fahue shook his head, and the orange ring emitted a series of waves that radiated out toward the entire earth like electromagnetic waves. The radiation emitted by the ring's energy was transformed into a special communication channel. However, even after waiting for a long time, there was still no response. Reverend Fahue's countenance turned even more grim. It was only 10 minutes later that Grade's exasperated voice was transmitted through the ring's energy. "Damn it, it's all that Feng Xingjian's fault. He killed everyone else. Ziling, Kaosi, and the others are all dead," Grade said in an anxious tone. "What should we do?" At the same time, Feng Xingjian gripped the neck of the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, tightly with one hand. He watched as Bruce's body became increasingly dimmer due to Feng Xingjian's corruption, and a blue ring was slowly taking shape on his hand. How could this be? Although we suffered a great loss before, we relied on the power of the ring to regroup, so no one died. I don't know, Grade shouted. That Fang Xingjian's battle prowess seems to have increased. This can't do. I feel that he has found me. At the next moment, Grade's voice was cut off by Reverend Fahui, and Reverend Fahui's countenance turned even more grim. No, I can't go on like this. At the thought of this, Grade brought along a stream of orange light and soared up into the sky. He paused for a moment, got his bearings, and with a dash, he disappeared into the ends of the sky. Even with so many of us joining forces, we aren't a match for Fang Xingjian. At this moment, we can no longer hold back. We must inform him immediately. Simultaneously, Hiswell kept on scanning the Abyss Sword. Perhaps these 3 divine swords also contain the secret to defeating him. At the moment when Fahui disappeared, Fang Xingjian stood at the spot where he had been standing, quietly looking in the direction in which Fahui had left. He's heading in this direction to seek the Gold Army's assistance. Fang Xingjian's eyes flashed with an inexplicable glow, as if there were countless pieces of information flashing in them. The other 2 seemed to be studying my swords, wanting to obtain more power from them. This will make it easier for me to perform my heart sword path. The immortal child's soft laugh rang out in Fang Xingjian's mind. There's also a little guy who seems to have gone out of control. Don't we need to care about him? Fang Xingjian shook his head. There must be some variables. However, they haven't thought of looking for that person even at this point. It seems that I'll have to put in more effort. Let's chase out the 2 little guys who are hiding first. On the other side, in outer space within a huge universe space station, the Gold Army's commander, Edward, looked at the latest information with some surprise. I didn't expect that this Fang Xingjian would be able to do this. Interesting. A subordinate's voice rang out in his ears. Sir, they're coming over. Edward's gaze swept across the huge full-length glass window and saw that in outer space, a total of 4 streams of light, gray, yellow, orange, and black, were charging over and slowly stopping outside his space station. Edward, Hui said, you should already be aware of the situation. Right now, Fang Xingjian's prowess is overwhelming and he's wreaking havoc across the entire planet. We must join forces in order to subdue him. Grade stood behind the 3 of them, hiding the blue, pink, and purple rings in his body. The powers of the 4 armies kept on seething in his body, causing hints of greed to appear in the depths of his eyes. He almost had an irresistible urge to immediately eat up the 3 commanders before him, as well as Edward, who was in the space station. Wait a little more. Just wait a little more. Not interested. Edward shook his head and gave his answer. My time is limited. No matter what he wants to do, as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm not interested in bothering about it. Hearing Edward's words, the countenances of Hui He and the others changed. It was only then that they recalled that the people of the Gold Army were more concerned about the search for the truth. As for other things like Earth's safety, the changes in countries, and the reshuffling of power, they did not care as long as they did not affect their desire for knowledge. Hui said, do you think that he'll stand by and watch after defeating us? Ziling, Kaosi, and Bruce have all been killed by him. After we're killed by him as well, no one will be able to help you. When the nest is overturned, no eggs can remain intact. Don't you understand such a simple logic? Edward shrugged and said, then I'll just submit to him. As long as I can continue with my research, it's nothing even if I submit to another commander. Hearing that, everyone was stunned, as if they had not expected that Edward would do this. Chapter 940. It was only at this moment that they realized that Fang Hui did not care about things like authority, influence, or wealth. What he wanted was merely to continue his research and to continue pursuing the truth. However, regardless of whether it was Hui He or the King of Trepidation, one of them found it hard to accept that he was being controlled by others, while the other did not allow himself to fear others. As for Grade, he wanted to engulf Fang Xingjian and all the other commanders. Reverend Fahui was also unable to accept Fang Xinjiang massacring the army's warriors. Therefore, it was impossible for the four of them to submit to Fang Xinjiang. However, Edward did not have such an obstacle. The few of them tried to persuade him again, but Edward had no intention of changing his mind. Just then, Fa Hui took out the abyss sword and said, "This divine sword was obtained from Fang Xinjiang and contains the profoundness of the world. If you're willing to join forces with us to defeat Fang Xinjiang, we can let you study this sword." Hearing his words, the countenances of both the King of Trepidation and Grade turned grim, and they almost stepped out to stop him. However, Hui revealed a hint of determination and said, "Edward, if you don't believe us, you can feel free to check out this longsword. We definitely won't stop you." Oh, there was not much information regarding the Abyss sword in the information Edward had obtained previously. However, after hearing the duo's introduction, he felt a little curious. At the next moment, countless probing devices inside and outside the space station aimed at the Abyss sword in Fa Hui's hand, immediately attracting Edward's attention. Unknown metal, and this molecular structure. Is it man-made? Such strong radiation and magnetic flux. To think that there's an unknown space inside. Interesting. Edward's calm gaze, which seemed as if there was nothing that could attract his attention, suddenly lit up. He looked at the Abyss sword and said, "You guys are saying that this was obtained from Fang Xinjiang?" "That's right." Hui immediately shared what they knew and added, "The remaining two swords have been taken away by Ming Wang and Akaryu Jushru, respectively. Right now, both of them are in hiding and studying the profoundness of this sword." The King of Trepidation continued, "Edward, if you're not willing to help, then we can only consider releasing those two fellows." Hearing the King of Trepidation's words, everyone's countenances changed. Even Edward, who had been calm all this while, frowned and said, "Are you threatening me?" The King of Trepidation shrugged. "We can't just sit here and wait for our deaths, watching as Fang Xinjiang kills us one by one." Of course, he didn't really want to do that. He just wanted to use these words to threaten Edward. However, his words seemed to be very effective. As he spoke, the entrance to the space station slowly opened. Edward continued to communicate with the ring's energy. "Come in." On Earth, in a stretch of wilderness in North America, Akaryu Jushru stayed in a fortification that was 12 kilometers underground. Streams of crimson light appeared on his body, wrapping around the light pursuit sword like many threads. Countless energies and knowledge surged incessantly between the two of them, helping him to explore the profoundness of the light pursuit sword. Truly amazing. Not only does this sword possess terrifying energy, but the profoundness it contains isn't inferior to even the Book of Wisdom. As long as I'm given a few more months, I'll definitely be able to surpass everyone and reach a level that no one has been able to reach since ancient times. Fang Xinjiang must have relied on this divine sword to become so strong. With my aptitude, however, at that moment the entire underground base trembled. Akaryu Jushru frowned and thought to himself, "This secret base was specially built by me alone over a few years. I didn't tell anyone about my visit this time around." Just as he was thinking of this, the steel door that was 10 meters away was suddenly sent flying, and Fang Xinjiang walked in unhurriedly. "You're late." A hint of confidence flashed on Akaryu Jushru's face. "I've already comprehended the secret behind your great power. Right now Before Akaryu Jushru could finish his words, Fang Xinjiang had already appeared before him. Fang Xinjiang kicked him in the chest at a speed that surpassed his senses. Rumble. Akaryu Jushru's physical body was instantly crushed into dust, and he dashed out toward the ceiling of the secret room together with the light pursuit sword. He was like a crimson meteor, instantly passing through several tens of layers of steel plates, cement, and concrete before dashing up into the sky. Having his physical body smashed up with a single kick, Akaryu Jushru was completely overwhelmed with astonishment. He did not dare to resist in the slightest. He let out a sharp cry and controlled the red energy, disappearing into the sky with an unbounded leap. Fang Xinjiang looked at Akaryu Jushru, who had fled without even turning back. Feng Xingjian smiled and disappeared without a trace. In the space station, Edward was using all sorts of means to gather information from the Abyss Sword. The more he looked at it, the more astonished he became. Regardless of whether it was its strength, density, molecular atomic structure, or other standards, all of them far surpassed his understanding. The information contained within the sword and the knowledge within the information made him feel even more engrossed. Just as he and the others were anxiously waiting for Edward's reply, the Green Army's Ming Wang and the Red Army's Akaryu Jushru had both fled into the space station. Right now, both Ming Wang and Akaryu Jushru had their physical bodies smashed up by Feng Xingjian. They could only use their ring's energies to maintain a physical form. Fortunately, the two divine swords were still under their control. After a series of questions and answers, they found out that the two of them had also been attacked by Feng Xingjian. At this moment, a hint of graveness finally flashed in Edward's eyes. Feng Xingjian, he was able to find you guys and defeat you with a single move. However, you guys were able to escape all the way here. As Edward spoke, the entire space station started moving, and over 10 scouting devices were released in all directions. Hui reacted very quickly as well. You're saying that he chased us all the way here? No, Edward said calmly. It's just that since he was able to find Akaryu Jushru and Ming Wang, he'll naturally be able to find us as well. As they spoke, the alarm rang out, and many screens lit up, displaying the void space over 10 kilometers away from the space station. Feng Xingjian was standing there, looking in the direction of the space station. A chill rose in everyone's hearts, and he said bitterly, "He's here." At the next second, a strong sense of danger rose in their hearts. They saw Feng Xingjian lift a finger and point in their direction. Chapter 9:41. Dodge quickly. Edward's countenance changed, and he turned into a stream of golden light, piercing through the outer shell of the space station and darting into outer space. The other commanders also performed their abilities and fled in all directions. Almost at the instant they left the space station, a stream of sword light shot out explosively from Feng Xingjian's fingertip. It expanded rapidly in the blink of an eye, turning into a light pillar with a diameter of over several hundred meters. It traversed across the vacuum, completely encompassing the space station and vaporizing it completely. Fa Hui, Hui, King of Trepidation, Grade, Ming Wang, Akaryu Jushru, and Edward. A total of 7 commanders were gathered here. Other than the Silver and Cyan commanders, who had yet to appear, Feng Xingjian had already met all the commanders of the 13 armies. Looking at Feng Xingjian, Edward said, "Feng Xingjian, we finally meet." His entire body flashed with golden light like the most dazzling heart in the night sky. Amidst the distorted light, there seemed to be countless characters and numbers jumping about, giving off an endless, mysterious feeling. Edward continued, "Is there really no chance for us to reconcile? You're also the White Army's commander. You might not know this, but this planet is shrouded by even more terrifying dangers other than us. We shouldn't be killing each other." Looking at Edward, Feng Xingjian's heart skipped a beat. To think that he has the strength of a Tier 5 divine level expert. Moreover, his will has reached the microscopic level and is already comparable to the heavenly wolf kings. It was not easy for him to be able to reach this level in this world where the cultivation civilization was lower than miracle worlds. It's a pity that since you're standing in my way, I can only kill you. Feng Xingjian's thoughts raced at lightning speed. Without replying to Edward's question, Feng Xingjian raised his hand, and a myriad of sword lights scattered out, charging out toward the 7 of them like a meteor shower. Damn it, he can't be bothered to reconcile with us. A hint of fury flashed on the faces of the 7 commanders. Feng Xingjian's contempt or even disregard had trampled on all of their pride. However, in the face of the overwhelming sword light, they could only use their own techniques to evade at the first moment. Among them, Edward was the most relaxed. With a slight movement, he distorted space and took a single step forward, covering a distance of over 10 kilometers to arrive before Feng Xingjian. Then, with a slash of his sword fingers from top to bottom, the condensed light radiated and turned into a light sword with a temperature of several tens of thousands of degrees Celsius, slashing down toward Feng Xingjian. Not bad. Feng Xingjian allowed the sword of light to strike his chest. It rubbed against his chest, split apart, crumbled, and finally turned into specks of starlight. Feng Xingjian said calmly, "To be able to reach this stage in this world, your talent can be considered quite good. However, it is still meaningless." As Feng Xingjian said these words, his body was gradually encompassed by a layer of silver. He turned into an existence that was like a metal man, perfectly reflecting all the light and shadows in the surroundings. Heaven-piercing upper extremity sword physique activated. Just as Feng Xingjian finished saying these words, Edward continued to attack. Golden light flashed on his fingertips, and two gushes of power, one real and one fake, were suddenly formed. Take my antimatter explosion. At the next moment, the two gushes of power merged into one on his fingertips, and a violent explosion instantly covered up Feng Xingjian's body completely. High temperatures radiated out in all directions. Although there was no air or impact waves in outer space, the antimatter explosion from this attack could still kill most Tier 5 Divine level experts. However, under Edward's astonished gaze, Feng Xingjian stood where he was without any injuries after the explosion dissipated. Edward's gaze narrowed, and he probed out toward Feng Xingjian's body. However, he was instantly entranced by what he saw. In his senses, no matter how he magnified and delved in, he was unable to see any particle structure in Feng Xingjian's body. It was as if he would forever be a single entity. After understanding what this meant, the calmness and indifference on Edward's face disappeared for the first time. He finally understood what a great mistake he had made. To think that I didn't pay any attention to a monster like this. A hint of regret flashed on Edward's face, and he let out a sigh. He turned into a lump of golden light and hugged Feng Xingjian. "Oh, you want to self-destruct? It's meaningless." Scorching golden light burst out from Edward's body, and all of the ring's energy started to materialize a tremendous amount of matter and antimatter. Edward grinned, and a hint of regret flashed in his eyes. "It's a pity that I won't be able to see your defeat." At the instant the two of them clashed, the other 6 commanders were forced to flee crazily by a series of sword light. This continued until a piercing golden light came encompassing down from the horizon. One side of the entire Earth was encompassed by that golden light, bringing this side of the Earth from night to day. Over 1 billion people looked at the abnormality in the sky in astonishment. It was only after 5 minutes that the golden light gradually disappeared. The remaining 6 commanders had already fled in all directions. The final message that Edward had transmitted to them was still ringing out in their minds. "Release Silver and Green. They're the only ones who can kill this monster." The 6 of them fled on their own, occasionally communicating through the ring's energy waves. About an hour later, the 6 of them gathered on the moon's surface. "What should we do?" He asked, feeling a little unwilling to accept this. "Do we really have to look for Silver and Green?" A hint of horror flashed in the King of Trepidation's eyes, and those 2 terrifying figures once again appeared in his mind. Out of everyone present, he was probably the one who feared those 2 the most. It was because the 2 of them harbored ill intentions toward him. No, the King of Trepidation was the first to object. "If we release them, the entire Earth will be destroyed." Akaryu Jushru held onto the light pursuit sword and said, "They won't destroy Earth, but they might destroy you. You're opposed to releasing them because you're afraid of this, right?" The King of Trepidation said furiously, "Akaryu Jushru, don't speak as if you're not afraid. If we release them, you'll never be able to carry out your intentions. You'll never be able to progress." Akaryu Jushru merely smiled coldly. "If we release them, we'll just be suppressed. If we don't release them, we'll die. You've seen it for yourself. That Feng Xingjian wants our lives." Hui shook his head and said, but it's too dangerous to release them. These two guys can't be controlled at all. Half of us might die the moment they come out. The Green Army's Ming Wang looked at the Thunder Calamity sword in his hand and said slowly, but if we don't release them, we'll all die. Fang Xingjian's powers have completely surpassed our level. You've seen it for yourself. Even Edward is helpless against him. We can't release them, Grade said furiously. If we release them, we'll never have peace. Do you guys still want to return to that terrifying era? Everyone's countenances stiffened as if they had recalled something. Fa Hui stabbed the abyss sword into the ground and said, then let's just think of ways to send them out. We were able to do it previously, and we can do it this time around as well. After all, their opponents are only themselves. Just as the six of them were arguing, an orange light suddenly appeared before them. It was Edward, who should have self-detonated and died earlier. Faced with the six of them who were on guard, Edward raised the orange ring in his hand. The ring's energy shone out, turning into waves and starting to talk to the six of them. Don't be nervous. I'm a clone prepared by the previous owner. After the previous owner dies, I'll be activated, Edward said. We don't have time to argue. We must release the two of them immediately. Only they can kill Fang Xingjian. After we kill Fang Xingjian, we can still think of ways to seal the two of them again. After all, they won't rest until one of them is dead. This is something we can make use of. Seeing the orange energy on Edward's body, the six of them temporarily let down their guard. No matter what, the ring's energy could not be faked. After hearing Edward's words, the six of them sank into silence. Chapter 942. Earth, Sacred White Crevice. Fang Xingjian held onto a page of the Book of Wisdom and was reading it with great interest. The immortal child sat at the side, holding onto a cup of tea. Just as he was about to drink it, he suddenly smiled. It has finally been decided. Those 7 people have already set off, but I didn't expect that person to be so far away from his planet. Saturn? Fang Xingjian also silently raised his head and looked in the direction of the starry sky. With their speed, it'll take them 1.5 years to make a round trip. It'll be enough for us to make ample preparations. Everything that Fang Xingjian and the immortal child had set up and done previously was to deal with that commander who had not been on Earth all this while. It was also an existence that gave them an endless sense of danger from their sudden inspiration senses. They understood that the test of this checkpoint rested on the Legion commander. Based on their investigations and the information that the immortal child had obtained after delving deep into countless confidential files, the 2 strongest commanders on Earth had never appeared before others. One of them was from the Silver Army, while the other was from the Cyan Army. Moreover, all the warriors from the 2 armies had never appeared before. According to the other armies, they were guarding some checkpoint and fending off enemies from beyond the starry sky. Even the immortal child had not been able to find out where they had gone. It was only when the 7 commanders had secretly set off for Saturn that they found out that the other party was in such a faraway place. Clearly, this was a secret that only these few commanders knew about. The Cyan Army advocates chaos and loves war. They oppose order, society, and even humanity. They were the common enemy of most of the armies, Fang Xingjian said. Fang Xingjian said, the Silver Army advocates justice and loves to uphold justice. They are existences that can kill commanders for the sake of a commoner. They often meddle in the affairs of other armies, and most of the commanders do not like them. The Silver Army and the Cyan Army are archenemies to begin with. Now it seems that these 2 armies are guarding Saturn. I wonder what the situation is like there. The immortal child nodded. It seems that the person we sensed is either the Cyan or Silver Army. He recalled the first time he received information about the other party. When his mind began to ponder over the other party's information, the pair of eyes that looked at him from the void. With just a glance, he had shattered 30% of his martial will. From then on, Fang Xingjian knew that this person's cultivation was equivalent to having broken through to Tier 6 of the divine level. Fang Xingjian was able to connect with space and even become one with it. Fang Xingjian could even sense when others mentioned or thought of his name. Therefore, he and Fang Xingjian had always referred to each other by their colors. The immortal child continued. However, according to these 7 people, they seem to have found a way to keep the 2 of them on Saturn, but I don't know how they did it. I'm afraid they're taking advantage of the conflict between the 2 sides, or perhaps there really are external enemies that they need to defend against. Fang Xingjian said, "In any case, now that the chess pieces have been laid, all we need to do is wait for them to fall into the trap. It just so happens that Saturn is far away, so I can make some preparations." As Fang Xingjian spoke, many pages of the Book of Wisdom floated out. Right now, Fang Xingjian had already analyzed most of the White Army's Book of Wisdom. The microscopic knowledge and the profoundness of space-time contained in it were a very good supplement to what he had learned in the past. However, when the immortal child saw the single page of the Book of Wisdom, his countenance turned bitter. Although he was also a Tier 5 divine level expert and had an extremely strong understanding toward nature, the universe, and the microscopic world, he had not come into contact with Earth's scientific system, nor had he used too many mathematical tools. To him, rather than analyzing the contents of the Book of Wisdom, he might as well use that primitive method to directly observe and summarize the laws of the natural world. Therefore, the immortal child smiled and said, "Forget about this Book of Wisdom. After you've analyzed it, just send it to me through information currents." At the next moment, he disappeared with a flash. Fang Xingjian shook his head and looked at the page in his hand, revealing a contemplative expression. This time around, he had 3 great goals for clearing the tribulations: perfecting the instant sword, perfecting the newly created heartsword path, and perfecting the divine country. During the past few days of research, he had already made some progress. Firstly, there was a lot of knowledge in the Book of Wisdom that was extremely helpful to him in perfecting the instant sword. Therefore, he wanted to continue collecting the other single pages of the Book of Wisdom. Secondly, regarding the perfecting of the heartsword path, Fang Xingjian's method was set on the 13 armies. These armies used their temperaments and wills to activate the energy in the rings, allowing Fang Xingjian to gain a lot of inspiration during this period of time. As for the construction of the divine country, Fang Xingjian had even more bold plans. In any case, I'll get someone to collect the Book of Wisdom first. With a single thought, a stream of information currents was sent out from Fang Xingjian's side to Priest Longmai's side. That night, the armies were defeated, and the news of all the commanders going missing spread throughout Earth. Priest Longmai took action personally, using his commander-level powers to wipe out the Despair Mountain Range, Holy Light Temple, and the other army's headquarters. The White Army also took the entire planet by storm. However, just such violence alone was unable to make everyone submit to them. This was especially so for many ambitious people. After the 10 commanders either died or went missing, they started to appear one after another. The separatist influences in various places were densely packed like the stars in the sky. Countless people rose up in revolt, clearly wanting to take this opportunity to proclaim themselves as kings. A total of over 100 general-level characters from the various armies started to stand up for themselves, and the few strong countries were wavering and extremely ambiguous. It was as if they also wanted to take this opportunity to break free from the army's control. The entire Earth seemed to be sinking into chaos. Although this was the case, many people were using the name of rebelling against the White Army. However, no one really attacked the White Army. The so-called name was just a name. Most of them were just hiding behind the scenes, getting some small fries to come out and wave flags and shout battle cries to test the White Army. Are all of them trying to sound out our intentions? Fang Xingjian asked, propping up his chin. That's right, Priest Longmai said. Sir, it's better to wipe out all those who resist with thunderous means. Otherwise, a single spark can start a prairie fire. However, Fang Xingjian shook his head. It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in ruling over Earth. You could just manage it yourself. As for those people who want to become independent, there's no need to care about them as long as they hand over the Book of Wisdom. Priest Longmai was stunned for a moment. However, out of respect for Feng Xingjian, he agreed without any objections. Therefore, over the next few weeks, countless influences handed over the contents of the Book of Wisdom that they had collected or the ones that the armies had collected previously. However, while there were those who were willing to submit, there were also those who resisted. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.